What made you go from innocent bystander to full-blown aggressor? I lived with random roommates one summer in college. This one guy used to regularly wake up to his alarm, hit snooze, and then manage to leave for the day without ever turning the damn thing off. He always locked his door and it would just go off endlessly. I complained about it constantly, and he'd still never managed to turn it off. It woke me up an hour earlier than needed every single day, and it was driving me insane. Finally, one day he forgot to close his door, so I took the radio, disassembled it, removed the speaker, and then put it all back together and set the correct time. I think he missed a couple of quizzes because of it, but screw it, he deserved it. He finally got a new alarm which had a much shorter snooze timer, and it never happened again. It was awesome. This is my high school bully story. I was a big kid growing up, but a real softie. You could tell by looking at me that even though I was 5'11" and 210 pounds at the age of 12, that I wouldn't do anything. I got picked on a lot as a result. The smaller bullies got major props by making me tear up. One day, the kid who sat behind me in class had been flicking me in the back all day, and I finally asked the teacher to stop him. She said, and I still frickin' remember this at 25, "Are you going to cry now?" in the most disgusted-sounding voice an adult can level at a child. I was crushed by the adult figure responding in that way, and deeply shaken. 15 minutes later, my bully, having been affirmed by the teacher pretty much, decided he'd walk by me and break my pencil. I didn't go into a fit of rage or scream or shout. I started crying softly. I stood up and slowly walked to the bully. The teacher asked me why I was standing up, but I wasn't in a state to answer her. I lifted this kid, who weighed about half as much as me, up by the neck and testes and slowly walked, still crying, to the closed classroom window, knocking the teacher out of the way with one shoulder. I slammed this kid into the window 3 or 4 times before it broke off the hinges and then proceeded to shove him out the window. The crap storm that followed included my parents suing the school and the teacher and winning. The school kept video logs of every day of class via a camera setup. They had 200 days of me being bullied on camera. 40 reports from me and my parents that I was being bullied, and 0 response to any of that. Didn't even move my seat in the classroom. The teachers and principal became responsible when they take you under their protection. They legally are both responsible for the bully and letting them do what they're doing, and the safety of the child being bullied. It took about a month of court hearings to come to a settlement. This girl used to bully me in year 7 when we caught the bus home. She used to pull my hair and pinch me and steal my water bottle and drink it. Pushed to the edge, I filled said bottle with vinegar one night, and the next day she began her daily torment. She snatched my bottle and drank it, and then threw up. Minor victory. Wow. You know, after the first sip, you know that she'd know something was definitely up. She was really committed to the act to realize that this was not pH-neutral water and was in fact acidic vinegar, and just commit to the whole damn bottle to spite you. That's a wrecked stomach to try and ensure that you finish your act of bullying. I know that she's the bad guy in this, but I kind of admire her dedication to the task. I was a mere witness to this story. A few years back, we got a very large snowfall. My neighbor decides to take his 2 small children, 5 and 2, out to build a snowman. The kids were so proud of it, they couldn't wait to show anyone walking down the street what they'd made. We woke up the next morning to see tire tracks through the neighbor's front yard going right through the newly flattened snowman. When the kids found out, they were very distressed and crying. So, being the awesome dad he was, he took them back out and rebuilt the snowman. Waking up the next morning, the same thing happened again. So this time, the guy and his kids built the snowman around this giant boulder that he had in his front yard as part of his landscaping. About 2 a.m., I heard a loud crash and looked out of my window to see a truck hobbling down the road with smoke coming out of it. Needless to say, the kids weren't as upset about their snowman the next day. We never did find out who it was. I remember in college I was walking down a sidewalk and some kid on a bicycle rode by me and spit on me. As he rode off and laughed to himself, he neglected to listen to me throw down my book bag and take off after him. At the time, I could run a 1 minute 58 half miles, so I doubt he could have escaped even if he'd seen me chasing him. I caught him within just a few seconds, pulled him off his bike, and told him if he didn't wipe it off and apologize, I was going to throw him into traffic. We were right next to a busy road. He was pretty shaken up, and I doubt he'll ever do that again. I'd always help my family, friends, neighbors, and anyone they knew with anything without asking for anything in return. We're talking childcare, computer problems, house repairs, stuff like that. I lived with an older woman out in San Francisco in an old Victorian for 4 months. Since I arrived, I fixed and replaced quite a few things around the place. plumbing, faucets, hose, heaters, couch, toilet seat, washing machine, a few other things. About a week before I left, she wanted me to build her a bookshelf. I told her I'd do it if I received compensation. She got angry, saying that it's just a bookshelf and that I can build it no problem. She failed to notice that she doesn't have the equipment to build it, and I'd probably have to rent the tools. And I told her that if she just wants one, to just buy it, and that I'd help her put it together then. She got even angrier and said, "I give you a place to stay and you won't even help me build a shelf." I couldn't hold it in any longer. I screamed, "I pay to live here. I pay for my stay, my food, and whatever else I use while here. You could have spent money hiring someone to fix everything that I did in this place. I bet the cost in repairs would be way more than what I pay per month living here." So, a week later, her still angry at me, I left without paying last month's rent. There was a kid in my math class that would sit and tout his superiority over me and tell me how much better he is than me in every facet of life. I sat there in class for a good 3 months enduring this. I never replied except to ask him to please go away, or can you leave me alone? I'm trying to listen and work. I even asked my teacher twice if I could move away, and she said no. Then one day, with him making fun of me, as usual, something inside of me finally snapped, and I turned to him, with all of my pent-up rage swimming, and said, "Shut the frick up before I punch you in your goddamn smug face." He then gets up and says, "Come on, let's fight." I almost got up with him before the sweet Amish girl that I was friends with said, "Don't do it. Sit down now." I regained my composure for a minute and sat down. He sat down and said, "That's what I thought, B-word." I just calmly turned to my teacher and said, "Can I move, please?" She said no. I just turned around, gripped the kid's desk, and flipped it with him in it completely over, and turned back to the teacher and said, "How about now?" I'd never felt more satisfied and angry at the same time in my life. No one cared about the kid because they all knew what happened. A football player even came up to me and said, "I would have thrown the desk after flipping it." In short, after putting up with a kid's crap for 3 months and being polite to him, I finally snapped and flipped his desk and him on his head. At a summer camp in 2003, I saw a bunch of younger kids looking up adult flicks on the public computers. I told them to check out Tub Girl. I could hear them screaming as I walked away. So there's this wretched woman who owned a boutique next door from the restaurant where I work. One day she came into the pub and was her usual witchy, entitled self. She ordered a club sandwich with extra crispy bacon and an extra spicy Bloody Mary, since apparently her taste buds stopped working years ago. I go to the bar to get our Bloody Mary, I douse the ice in Tabasco sauce, and fill it up with vodka and our already spicy Bloody Mary mix. Then I add in a bit more Tabasco sauce just for myself, around a full ounce of Tabasco in a 10-ounce glass. To my surprise, she loved it. Grrr. It came time to send the sandwich order to the kitchen. I put her order in and added a custom modifier to the ticket. In my frustration, I wrote, "Set the bacon on fire and put the ashes on the sandwich." When her order was almost ready, the cook asked me if I was serious about it. I replied, well, she ordered a club with extra crispy bacon. He held up a spatula with 3 slivers of black, burnt meat that hardly looked like bacon at all. I chuckled, thinking he'd pulled a joke on me. At this point I was like, screw it, that's what she asked for. He finished preparing the club. I brought it out to her ready and willing to take it back and have a new one made. She ate 3/4 of the club and took the rest home, and said on the way out that it was the best time she had been at this place. I tried as hard as I could to be the full-blown aggressor, and it didn't even work. I live in an apartment complex that has community laundry. People have been opening up dryers to check if there's laundry in them. It's so loud that you can't really hear if the dryer is going. I saw this girl open up 2 dryers which are full of wet clothes and just leave them turned off. After she finally finds an empty dryer, puts her clothes in it, turns it on and leaves, I set her settings to fluff, no heat, and the time to 10 minutes. There's nothing more irritating than coming back after 50 minutes to an hour and finding out you have to wait another cycle. Oh my god. People who do this are like a much more inconsiderate version of something that already makes the narrator furious. People leaving the gosh darn door open in general when they come in from the outside. Except in this case, you're inconveniencing people for up to an hour and disrupting their plans. Not to mention all the people in the queue for the dryer after those people. Well, here's another story of dryer-related vigilanteism. This happened to me. I was using the dorm laundry a few years back in college. I was working on a paper, so I wasn't paying attention while my clothes ran. A girl came in, opened the dryer my clothes were in, took my wet clothes out while they were in the process of drying, put her clothes in and tells it to keep running. She did this to 3 dryers, 2 of which were mine. I noticed this only after she did it to the last one. She looked me right in the eye, laughed, and left. I moved my clothes into the new dryers. Yeah, there were still empty ones available. Those old dryers wouldn't stop the timer while the doors were open, so I opened the doors to the 3 that she was using. I still had a load going in one of my washers, so I was going to be stuck there for over another hour. When she came down for her clothes, she noticed that her clothes were still wet. She cursed and set them again, this time paying for it herself. She'd used my money to do the last load since she took my clothes out of it. I opened the doors again. While my last load was drying, she came down to fetch her clothes again and cursed that the dryers must be broken and switched to different ones. I opened those too. By the end, she must have wasted $5 and 2 hours. It was starting to get fun and I had nowhere else to be while working on that paper. She dropped out of college later that semester because she never went to her chemistry class. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work as a teller for a bank and a brand new customer was making a deposit for $50K, the first deposit ever into that account. So of course there's going to be a hold on the check. I've always been nice and I extend the offer to call on the check the next day and if it clears I'll manually release the hold. This guy was a jerk from the start. He got very defensive and demanded that there was no hold. I tried to explain I'll call on the item and I have a contact at the drawing bank, but he kept cutting me off. He then demanded I close his account. Instead of trying to talk him out of it, I didn't give a crap. One less rude customer is a win to me. So I said okay and closed his account out for him right then and there. The guy was so dumbfounded that I hadn't bent over backwards to try to convince him to keep it open. He ended up walking to my branch manager and started to complain about me. I shouted over, "Mister, you asked me to close your account, don't forget to mention that." I'm very lucky to have a branch manager that will always back up her employees. She asked the customer, "Did you ask him to close your account?" Well, he was doing his job and did what you asked him to do. And then she just let him rant on since she wasn't going to give in. Finally, after he left, we all shared a laugh. I've been working at the bank long enough to have some pull when it comes to this kind of stuff. In short, I closed out a customer's account after he asked me to do so and then he got upset for not fighting to keep his account. There was this guy who lived next to me in an apartment building, and every morning at 8:30 he'd leave his apartment to go to work. I worked till late, and would usually be asleep at this time. Every morning he'd ring my doorbell like 5 times and then go to work. I then proceed to get up and check the door, see there's no one there, and then I can't go back to sleep. He thought it was funny and that I didn't really care, but in all honesty I really needed that sleep. So one day, I got up at 8:25, and when he came, before he knocked, I opened the door. I had a bullhorn waiting and shouted at the top of my lungs, "F off!" I honestly think he crapped his pants. He never did that again. Ha! As a psychopath's son, I'd like to apologize. My father, the psychopath, did the same thing to a lesbian couple that lived down the street from us. Every day, morning, noon, or night, he'd honk his car horn while passing their house. He thought it was hilarious. I always found it embarrassing and sad. It was our last night in Fiji, so we thought we'd treat ourselves and go out for a nice dinner. We went to a restaurant that would normally be way out of our price range, but screw it, it'll probably be our last family holiday. For the entire entree and main course, these 2 little frickin' wiener kids are running around screaming between tables, around the waiters, trying to get into back of house. The waiter asked their parents to keep them seated, to which the mum responded, "Don't tell me what to do." What happened next time they ran past our table? Well, my foot just happened to be in the way. The kid hit the floor and skidded like 2 meters. Everyone knew it was me, but no one said anything at the time, partly because my family was trying not to laugh. You know what? I still don't feel bad. The body shop ripped me off. They held my car hostage until I paid up. All of their locks came down with a case of superglue, and the EPA got a phone call about the leaking oil storage tank out back that I noticed when I was there. It's a parking lot now. Someone smashed the pumpkin I had on my front porch for Halloween. I was so mad that night, I took an old purse and took a dump in it. I then put it on the same step my pumpkin was on, then hid in my room and watched out the window. I don't know if it was the same kid that smashed my pumpkin that later tried to steal the purse, but the happiness I took from that moment of a kid reaching his hand into the purse while he was walking away to steal the money more than made up for the anger of a smashed pumpkin. When people around me start texting during movies, I lean over and very obviously read their texts. They then quickly put the phone away. You people are all bold in a way that I very much envy. I think the thought of a confrontation even this direct scares me to my very core. And yes, people who have their phones out in theaters are nightmares. I did the deed with the babysitter. I was in a marriage that was physically, mentally, and verbally just a hellhole. I was constantly accused of making the beast with two backs with the babysitter. For some reason, in my ex-wife's twisted mind, no matter how long I left the house for, as soon as I crossed the threshold of the front door, my manhood immediately went into the babysitter. Outside, moving cars around for 2 minutes? I'm railing the babysitter. Walk away from her in the grocery store? I'm receiving a down-under kiss from the babysitter. Leave the bedroom at night to go take a leak? Well, the only thing I was apparently leaking was my seed into said babysitter. If my ex-wife closed her eyes for 3 seconds and couldn't see me, I was having a blisteringly fast quickie with the babysitter. I consider myself a pretty honorable person. While I was battling for custody, our marriage was still considered legally binding, as the divorce wasn't finalized until custody was. I was busy trying to be an honorable person, while my ex-wife was pretty much getting busy with everyone I knew to spite me. Our custody battle lasted 3 years. I was a saint in those 3 years. Didn't enter into another relationship, didn't do the deed, quit drinking entirely, and focused completely on our daughter. As soon as I won custody and the paperwork was finished, one of my very first phone calls I made was to the babysitter. She had been 19 when she first started babysitting for us, and was 23 when everything was finalized. I was about 28. I called her, we went to the bar, and that night we had sweaty, angry, spiteful grudge whoopy. Our mutual hate for my ex-wife reared its head, and we used that energy to rail the ever-loving stupid out of each other. I was seriously concerned we were going to injure each other. That kind of bedroom fun. We didn't even try to hide it from my ex-wife because at this point we both disliked her. Not only had she constantly accused me of doing the no-pants dance with the babysitter, she had accused the babysitter of doing the same to me and physically attacked her at one point. We were grudge bumping. That was it, plain and simple. It only lasted about 2 months, 2 really great months filled with great whoopee. We knew from the beginning it was just spite procreation, and we eventually agreed to go our separate ways. Normally, I'm not a spiteful person. I don't do the deed outside of a relationship, but we'd just been accused of it so much that we were like, screw it, might as well. When I was in high school, my family had come over for Thanksgiving dinner, and my younger brother, by about 2 years, started to badmouth and talk back to everyone in a yelling manner. While always being prone to migraines, I was still the let's talk this out in a nice calm manner kind of guy. That night, however, I had a severe migraine and was getting highly annoyed by his yelling. After asking him to kindly stop and getting blown off in front of my entire family, I just swept him up and slammed him on the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of him. I figured since I'd never done anything like that before, I'd get a slap on the wrist. Everyone just looked at me as though they couldn't believe their eyes. I then left and fell asleep, and the next morning everyone pretended it didn't happen. The end. A couple of months ago, there was a teenager sitting in front of me who kept pulling his phone out to check Facebook of all things during the movie. Every time his phone lit up, I started kicking the back of his seat. It took him surprisingly many rounds of kicking to make the connection between phone on and seat kicking, but eventually he gave up. I am a pretty big guy, but I'm very light on my feet. Whenever I go into a crowd, I'm very polite and can stop on a dime when people dart in front of me. I just got back from London, and this is a city where people give 0 Fs about anything, especially on the tube. Nobody waits for anyone to get off, they just shove their way in. I'd had enough. I started laying shoulders into people as I got off. An oblivious young woman of 5'2" and 115 pounds with her eyes glued to her iPhone did not stand a chance. Slightly taller Frenchmen cursed me. I'm sure what they were saying was brutal, but I couldn't understand. Perhaps my crowning achievement came at Harrods. I was walking in a straight line and going with the flow. 2 Asian women started to go upstream. One of them tried to squeeze in between me and a tea display. I wasn't yielding. She spun full circle and started yelling at me. However, she wasn't paying attention and walked straight into the tea display, which collapsed. I felt like I was in a video for Bittersweet Symphony. 15 years ago, I was in my first year of teaching the 7th grade, fresh out of college. I had a kid who'd been held back twice, so he was 15 years old in the 7th grade. He was massive, probably about 6'1" and 220 pounds. Had a bad reputation with the entire staff, so much so that I got warnings from other teachers about him. He and I had a decent rapport, although he never did much for the first semester in terms of homework or studying. About halfway through the year, for reasons I still don't know, he approached me and told me that his mum was sick with cancer, and that he knew he wasn't doing well in school, but he was so busy trying to take care of her at home that he had little time for his studies. He said he didn't want to be held back a third time, but he also had a reputation to uphold as the school's bad mother effer. He asked me not to tell any other students or staff. I made a deal with him to tutor him privately, find him some extra credit, Basically, I told him I'd pass him as long as he promised to give me as much effort and time as he could muster, given his circumstances at home, and he really obliged for the next 5 months. So that's the good guy part of my story out of the way. Fast forward to the last 3 weeks of school. I don't know what I ate for lunch that day, but I had to take the worst number 2 of my life. Being a first-year teacher, I didn't want to leave my class unattended, but I couldn't wait. I frantically tried to find someone in my hall to cover my class for a few minutes, but all the other teachers were busy and holding it wasn't an option. I made some lousy excuse about going to blow my nose, went to the student bathroom, took the quickest number 2 I can remember, and returned to class confident that nothing untowards had occurred. Well, I was wrong. Turns out in the 2.5 minutes I was gone, the kids were goofing around and some dumb idiot made an offhand comment to my aforementioned prodigy about doing the deed with his mum or something. In a story that was corroborated by about 15 7th graders, this kid calmly stood up, walked across the room, and slapped the crap talker so hard that it drove him to the ground. And what did I do? I said, "Oh, you guys must be messing with me," and went on about the rest of the class as if nothing had happened. I regret nothing. That kid's mum died a few years later, and I still get email updates from him once in a while. Turns out he decided to be an engineer and build bridges. What's your most awkward, "sorry, but I don't work here" experience? Made the mistake of wearing an orange t-shirt to Home Depot. I was approached 4 or 5 times walking back to the lumber section. The funny thing is the expression of confusion and denial on people's faces. I would say, "Oh, I don't work here, I just wore the wrong shirt today," and they would stare at me perplexed, wondering if I was messing with them. I was at a local thrift store, looking at old typewriters with my sister. They were very, very cheap, and she's a writer, so I was buying her one. There was a fellow there who heard me ask out loud a question about how it works. He was a nice old guy who came over and showed me the inner workings of the unit for a solid 50 to 60 minutes. He was very passionate about typewriters and had expert-level knowledge. After an hour of him showing me everything you could imagine with a typewriter and how they work, I asked a question about the price. He responds with, "Well, I don't know about that because I don't work here. I just like typewriters." He was probably lonely. There's an older gentleman who used to be a professional photographer but had to retire due to being constrained to a wheelchair. He hangs around our camera displays a few hours every week and talks to people about cameras. He's so knowledgeable and so enthusiastic that no one's complained since he started doing it over a year ago. I was at a local computer and game store, and this elderly gentleman asked me where they put the controllers for PS3. I told him, "Sorry, I don't work here, so I don't really know." He said, "Seriously, why would you even work here if you don't know where anything is, dummy?" 10 out of 10 would go to that store again. Imagine the asinine people the folks who do work here have to put up with then. Source: I work at a video game store. I was browsing movies at HMV when a lady came up to me and asked if I had Star Wars on Blu-ray. I was like, "Yeah, of course, they're my favorites." Then she asks where they are. At my house." That's when I realized she thought I worked there and wasn't just wanting to talk about Star Wars. I was in the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, a very busy store. I asked the shop owner something and he just said, "Give me a plastic bag," which I did. I understand Turkish. Then I helped him for a couple of minutes putting things in bags. I was just trying to help since he was really stressed out. He apologized so many times when he realized I wasn't one of his employees, and he gave me a discount. I mean, what was that guy's employee turnover that he didn't recognize whether someone in his shop was an employee or not? Or is this a one of those faces issue? In 2004, I worked at a Petco that was right next to a Best Buy, so the same blue shirt and khakis, only different logos. I went over to pick up a game right after work and got sucked into a chat with a guy about picking out a laptop. After 10 minutes of going through the pros and cons of various brands, he decides he'd like to get one. I was just like, "Cool, well, good luck with that." I used to work in a bar that was about a 5-minute walk from Tesco, a grocery store. Every Saturday afternoon, the bar would hit a lull between 4 and 5, so I'd get sent to Tesco to pick up fruit, mint, and juice for the night. And seemingly every Saturday, some customer in Tesco would come up to me and mistake me for staff there. My work uniform didn't even look similar to the Tesco uniform. I've never understood it. The best case of mistaking me for someone who worked in Tesco was this. A woman who came up to me while I had my hands full of cartons of juice. She started complaining about the crappy service and unhelpful staff. I tried telling her that I didn't work there, but she kept cutting me off. Eventually, she demanded to speak to my manager. I responded with, "Oh, you'll have to go to the bar around the corner to speak to the manager, that's where she is." The woman looked shocked for a second, but then said, "Oh, Well, that explains why this place is run like a poor excuse for a circus. Your manager is off in a bar drinking on the job. I should have guessed it. To which I responded, no, I work in that bar, and I was sent here for stock. If you want to speak to my manager, you can go to my workplace and talk to her. She realized immediately the mistake she'd made and became much nicer and very apologetic to me. You know someone is a terrible person when you can see them transform so quickly from monster to angel. Then you just know that they abuse that ability and have the power to be a jerk to someone and convince everyone else that it's the other way round because they're always nice otherwise. When I was done working and had gotten back to my apartment, still in my mailman clothes, I was stopped by a woman asking me whether or not I had her package. I had to explain to her that I wasn't at work and that I'd been her neighbor the past 2 years. I was at dinner in a decent restaurant in LA. I was wearing a suit but had taken my jacket off and wasn't wearing a tie, so it was black shoes and pants and a white shirt. I went to the bathroom and was passing this table, and this guy grabbed my arm as I was walking past and said, "Sorry, could you find out where our wine is? We asked you ages ago." At this point, I hadn't realized I resembled the staff in this place and was a bit shell-shocked. So I said, "Sure," and went for a tinkle. On my way back, I thought I'd be a dutiful human being and go and tell the barman, as it was on my way, that this guy hadn't had his wine. The barman slapped his forehead and said, "Hang on," and gave me a glass of white to take to him, which I did and apologized for the delay, and the guy appreciated it too. Then I sat down and went on with my dinner. You probably broke a liquor law by doing that. You're nice, though. I was at Target right after work. I had on a red polo and khakis, and it had my company name embroidered on it that starts with a T. I was doing some network stuff, so I wasn't wearing my normal dress clothes. I forget what I was buying, but I had my cart full and my purse over my shoulder. A woman asked me where the laundry detergent was. I'm used to this, so I just told her that I think it's down a few aisles. The woman lost her ever-loving mind on me, saying that I was a horrible employee, I should know where everything is in my store, I'll never be paid above minimum wage because I'm so stupid. She wanted my name, my supervisor's name, and the number to corporate. It was after her rant that I politely informed her, "Ma'am, I don't work here. I was just telling you where I saw it while shopping for my own stuff." She didn't believe me and went to find a manager. I went to the checkout. I guess she found a manager and brought him to where I was checking out, started demanding that he reprimand me. He then informed her that I didn't in fact work there. She was flabbergasted and just walked away. No apology, no nothing. The manager, however, did apologize to me. I told him no problem, not his fault. You can't fix stupid. In conclusion, I no longer wear red polos to Target. Once I was at Walmart pretty late at night around 11. I think I was looking for cold medicine or something like that. Anyway, a woman who looks to be in her late 30s, I'm 20, comes up to me and shows me her child's school supply list, asking if I can help her find some portfolio folder or something. I was about to tell her that I didn't work there when I saw her daughter, who looked to be around 7 or 8, in one of the aisles peeking out and looking tired and a little nervous. I know how Walmart can be in terms of finding an employee to help you, so I decided to just stick around and helped them find everything on the list. I realized that neither of them spoke very much English, which made some of the items on the lists confusing. It took a good 20 minutes, but they were both really grateful and nice. I guess it's not really an awkward story like you asked for, but still a story. In conclusion, helped a non-English speaking woman and her daughter find school supplies at Walmart, even though I don't work there. Haha, well that sounds like something quite a few people I know would do out of sheer social anxiety rather than inherent niceness. Still pretty great of you though. A couple of weeks ago, I was at my local PetSmart chatting with the one guy there who actually knows his stuff. I have had a good deal of experience with aquariums, but I like to run my ideas by other people before I try them out. We were talking, but a customer came up, so he broke off to assist them. As I was standing there looking at the fish, an old woman walks up to me and asks about what kind of bowl and food she should get for her goldfish her grandson had brought home from the fair. I started to tell her that I didn't work there, but as I glanced around, the guy I was talking to and the other employee were busy. So it went kind of like this. I don't really… You know, the thing is, goldfish actually need a fairly large aquarium, so you should either get at least a 30-gallon setup with this filter and such, or if you don't want to invest that much, I'm sure the store would be more than happy to take it off your hands. If you'd like a more manageable fish, I'd recommend a better. Now, here are some good setups for them. Yada yada yada. I finish helping the old woman and immediately get another customer. At this point, I notice there's a mini rush as it's around 5-ish, and people are stopping by after work. This other customer comes up to me and asks a question about what fish would work well in her son's guppy tank. At this point, I'm pretty much committed and I decide to help her too. Eventually, after about 25 minutes and several more customers, the crowd thins out and I go back to my conversation with the employee. I ended up helping PetSmart sell several fish and one aquarium that day. In conclusion, PetSmart customer mistakes me for employee. I assist customers for half an hour because I'm too awkward to correct her. When I was a teenager, I worked in Virgin Records, renamed to Virgin Megastores in the UK now. I'd finished my shift and I'd had a pretty terrible day. I was browsing to buy a couple of CDs to cheer myself up. A customer walked up to me and started asking questions. I'd dealt with customers all day, so I breezily responded, "Sorry, I don't work here." So the customer responds, "But you're wearing a Virgin uniform." There was a super awkward pause during which I could have easily said I'm off duty and about to leave, and recovered, but in panic said, "I just like to wear it," and I walked out of the store. You know those moments when years later you recall an awkward encounter and just shudder? That's my scumbag brain's go-to moment. I had a similar experience while working at HMV many years ago. I'd just finished a shift in the run-up to Christmas, so I slapped a jumper over my HMV t-shirt and started walking toward the door, when a customer decided that it'd be okay to block my path and demand to know if I worked there. I said yes, but I was no longer on the clock and that I'd be more than happy to direct her to one of my colleagues, who she'd see were all wearing visible HMV shirts. She insisted that I help her anyway, and when I told her no, she flipped her lid and told me she'd be speaking with the manager and that I should be fired. I still can't get over the sense of entitlement some people have.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Around Christmas time, I was on my lunch hour, in my uniform, picking up some Christmas stuff. I was in a card shop and this man in his 60s hit me over the head with a wrapping paper roll as a joke, before apologizing profusely on realizing I was a customer there. Having said that, I don't know why that would ever be considered a thing to do to someone who you don't know, whether they work there or not. I never resolved it. I was 16 and awkward. I was at the PX trying to pick out a rotisserie chicken for dinner when a guy came up to me and began asking where a couple of items were located in the store. Knowing that new people were always incoming, I told him what aisles some of the items were in, but then I said I was sorry for not knowing where one or two of them were located. He then got mad at me and said I should know the layout of where I work, and he was about to walk away angrily when I stopped him. I let him know that the people who work at the store wore a certain uniform, and as I wasn't wearing one, I obviously didn't work there. He still seemed mad and said, "Well, if you didn't look like a stock worker, you wouldn't have had to deal with me asking you questions." And then he walked off. My brother was at Best Buy and was mistaken for an employee because he was wearing a blue shirt. The first time someone asked him where something was, he politely told them he didn't work there, but he did tell them where the product was. The second time this happened, he thought he'd have some fun and pretty much had this guy following him all around the store looking for something my brother had no clue where it was. The guy eventually asked, "Do you even work here?" My brother simply replied, "Nope." The guy stormed out of the store so fast, my brother just went back to what he was doing. One time, my best friend and I were in Walmart digging in the $5 movie bin. We're standing looking at all these crappy movies, hoping to find a gem, when this random lady walks up and asks if we work there. I say, "Sorry ma'am, no we don't," and we continue digging through the bin. Well, this wasn't good enough for this lady. She stands there and asks us something about finding volleyball equipment. I forget exactly what it was she was looking for specifically. I asked if she looked through the sporting goods, which she was standing right in front of, and she says, "Well, yes of course, but I didn't see it. I thought y'all would know where it would be." At this point, my friend and I are both a little frustrated with the situation, so I tell her that we have no idea where else the volleyball equipment would be at the store. I ask if she's gone to Dick's Sporting Goods. That's when all heck broke loose. She raised her voice and started yelling about how she wasn't going to spend that much money and ranting and raving about the cost difference and this and that. My friend and I just looked at each other and walked away. In conclusion, lady wants to know where volleyball equipment is in Walmart and then yells at my friend and I, neither of us work there, for suggesting that she look at a dedicated sporting goods store. The dress code for the company I worked for was this black pullover and the standard dress shoes and trousers. I usually walk up to Asda or Walmart for lunch and stood for about 5 minutes deciding which sweets or chocolate I should get. As I'm looking, I get a tap on the shoulder. There's a woman standing there and she begins shouting at me, "I have been standing here asking you for help for 5 minutes." I give a weird look and she realizes I don't work at Asda and she gets embarrassed and walks away.
As I'm walking to the till, I notice someone who actually worked at ASDA in kind of the same attire except for that they have an ASDA in big green letters on their jumper. Finally, a place to share my stories. When I was younger, around 14, I used to go shopping with my mother, as I'm sure lots of people do. She told me to wait outside the store while she quickly went in, and I coincidentally was wearing a similar outfit to the store clerks. Blue top, grey pants. An older woman walked towards me and practically yelled out that she had gone online and found a product she wanted and demanded that I take her to it. I politely said that I didn't work there and that was the end of it, right? Wrong. She claimed that I had to work there. I was wearing the uniform. I tried to argue otherwise, but she just insisted that I work there, and she'll tell my manager. Eventually, my mum returned and we both left, but I still fill with rage at the thought of this woman. Ma'am, I don't work here. Yes, you do. Oh, okay. A reality-defying level of will to be a Karen on display here. Magnificent and inspiring, a feat of imagination we can all aspire to. Not awkward, but helpful. I noticed every helper in this store was ignoring this elderly lady. I happened to be wearing the same color of shirt and she came up to me for help. I happily helped her and even helped her go to the checkout lane. She tells me I'm a good employee and will write a nice letter to the company about me. A little backstory first. When I was about 11 years old, I went with my family to Philadelphia Zoo. It was about 80 degrees out and little me decided to wear a hoodie for some reason. Of course, I get too hot and need to take it off, but I forgot to wear a shirt underneath, so my parents brought me a shirt that said Philadelphia Zoo on it. So my family and I are walking around the gift shop right before we were about to leave. Little me is checking out some sweet stuffed animals when a middle-aged woman comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she says, "where can I find sunscreen?" I was kind of confused when she asked me, but I was happy to help since she asked politely. I quickly looked around and saw some non-souvenirs behind the counter. I'm guessing you can find it at the counter over there," I said. Then this woman gave me a look like she wasn't sure if I was intelligent or not. "So, you're just guessing?" she says. The way she said it made me realize something was off, but I didn't make the connection. Remember, I'm 11 fricking years old. "Yeah, I mean, there are batteries and stuff back there, so there should be sunscreen." She then gave me a quick smile and said, "Okay, thank you for your help." I didn't have a clue what happened until I told my dad what was happening as we were leaving. He started laughing and pointed out I was wearing the Philadelphia Zoo shirt, and this broad thought I'd worked there. My first day of class, someone thought I was a professor. I was only 20 and I didn't think I looked that old. "You've got to stop wearing the sweaters with the elbow pads, dude." I was on my break and decided to walk down the mall to the Bon, which is now Macy's. I was wandering around seeing what the sales were when I was approached by one of those high and mighty rich witches. She asked where something was and I told her I didn't work there. She got all huffy and stormed away. I went about my browsing. A few minutes later, here she comes again, this time with an actual store employee in tow saying, "That's her. That's the one that won't help me." The employee, actually a department manager, asked me why I was out of my department, and that I knew better than to not help a customer while approached. She then asked what department I was from. Finally, a chance to speak. I replied, "I sell shoes at," where I was promptly interrupted and given another tongue lashing, all while Rich Witch is sitting there with a smirk on her face. Manager told me to go to the office and wait for her. I turned on my heel and walked my way towards the exit doors instead. She catches up to me and loudly demands to know if I wanted to be fired or if I was going to go to the office. I responded, "I'm going to my office." She said there were no offices in that direction and demanded I turn in my name tag and gather my things. I took my name badge off, handed it to them while saying, "I don't think my district manager is going to like you firing this top-selling store manager from Kinney Shoes." She looked down at the name badge and back up at me, white as a sheet. Manager hands my badge back, mumbled an apology, and scurried away with her embarrassment and this rich witch. There's a lesson in this. Take your name badge off when you're on a break and go to other stores. While at my aunt's funeral, I was wearing my black suit. Hair was looking presentable, but my shoes were two different sizes and brands. Apparently, I looked like I worked at that funeral home. Probably because I was standing off to the side because I only knew 3 out of the 50 people there, including my aunt. Anyway, I was asked at least twice if I worked there or where this thing was by who else, family members I'd never met. They thought it was funny after I told them. I still don't know who they are.
I was in Normandy, France at one of the landing beaches, and some American tourists thought I was a tour guide. Me, being the kind of person I am, went along with it and started teaching them about the beach's history and telling them good places to visit. I'd only been there for an hour, but I did know the history rather well. I continued talking to them through the landing and taking questions, and then the tour guide turned up. I just laughed and walked away, and they thanked me in a confused manner. I don't think it dawned on them at that precise moment I was a random guy and not a tour guide. This has happened to me more than once. When I was a paramedic, I'd just finished my shift and popped into the grocery store to grab something quick for dinner breakfast. Apparently, an older woman's eyesight was off that day because she thought I worked there. Grocery store employees don't dress at all like a paramedic, but whatever. I helped her load a few frozen chickens into her cart. She thanked me profusely and wanted to get my name so she could tell my manager what a great employee I am. So I gave her the name and number of my supervisor. The next Monday, my supervisor calls me into his office and asks me to explain this voicemail. "Hello, my name is Old Woman. I just wanted to say that you have one of the finest employees in the entire grocery store. He helped me load all the chickens I needed for my potluck into my cart immediately and without hesitation. He was so kind and generous with his time and blah blah blah." His voicemail actually cut her off. The message was so long, so she called back and left a second voicemail just to finish her praise. My supervisor just stared at me. I stared back. We never spoke of it again. I think he was of the opinion that I was moonlighting as some sort of grocery store chicken-loading demigod. What companies have lost your business forever? Bank of America. Loyal customer for 10 years. Insulted time and time again. First with their bullcrap service fee for monthly auto-pay transactions, then I had to get a replacement debit card, which took way too long. I called to check on it, and a woman on the line said they'd never sent one out. So, very annoyed, I got another one. This card finally came, and I went to ATM to activate it, and it didn't work. Called back, and apparently this was the first card I'd ordered, which was now rendered useless because the second card, which was still in the mail, was now associated with my account. Got very irate, but remained polite with the woman on the line and was basically told there was nothing they could do. Still stuck with them. Fast forward to a different state a few months later. I got a call and I was told my account had been compromised. Was given some vague explanation about mass data theft, but basically told they had to deactivate my card and send me a new one. I told them how inconvenient this was, and they suggest I go to a branch to get a new card. I do this, and they say since my account was opened in a different state, they can't give me a temp card, and that I have to wait 5 to 7 business days again. Woman at the branch is nice and enters my new address, then calls the branch in Texas to get them to send me a new card. 5 to 7 days, no card. Call and find out that the card was sent to my old address in Texas because my address hasn't been updated, which is total bullcrap. I lose it. I don't scream, but I do ask her several pointed questions including, when is this company going to get its crap together? Which resulted in the rep acting as though I was the worst person in the world for swearing whilst frustrated and threatening to hang up. I apologize for swearing and then ask what they can do. Again, I'm basically told, tough crap, and that she can send me a new card and I can wait without one for another 5 to 7 days. I pause, think about it for 3 solid seconds and say, close my account, I'm done with your company. Short story? F Bank of America. HP. When my laptop was having overheating problems, the woman on the customer service line fricking lied and said my warranty had expired, even though I had multiple pieces of evidence showing that I had about a month left on my warranty. They were going to charge me $250 to fix the problem. I had to spend hours on the phone with various customer service associates just to get them to resolve the warranty issue. Luckily, I ended up fixing the overheating without shipping out my laptop, but still, F HP. I really like my laptop, but I'm never buying anything from them again after the bullcrap treatment I got. Currently on my HP, it can fry an egg because it gets so overheated. Also, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner built for a squirrel because of the fan. This story is 11 years old, and we don't know if HP have got better, but I can testify that my first PC from them was met with a similar level of customer service, namely telling me to try the same update that had disabled my PC's audio every prior time I'd installed it to fix my freezing problem.
PayPal, because they almost managed to mess up my overseas vacation. Long story short, at the time, still, they flagged and locked your account if you tried using their service in a different country than the one your verified address is located in. Fine. Banks sometimes do that too if you don't warn them you're traveling in advance. Where PayPal failed is in their unblocking process. You needed to input a secret code sent to either your verified phone or your verified address, both of which were inaccessible to me because I was halfway around the fricking world. Priceline.com, because 45 minutes away from the airport is not an airport area hotel. I avoid PayPal whenever possible, but it's hard to when a lot of online stores don't take anything else. A guy bought my PS2 and kept telling me to tell him when the PS2 was on its way. I sent the PS2 and updated the buyer. He immediately filed an unauthorized PayPal transaction dispute, which basically means he claimed that someone used his PayPal account without his permission, so he wanted his money returned. I explained what happened. I had the email conversation with the scammer saved and I had a postage receipt, but PayPal wouldn't have any of it. Fortunately, I never post anything until the money is in my bank account, so I didn't lose anything. My PayPal account remained locked, and they wanted me to repay them for refunding the scammer. Yeah, right. Now I just use my girlfriend's account when they're the only payment option. GameStop. They just cannot compete with Steam or GOG.com for PC games. GameStop sucks, but for console games and hardware, you can get it all early if the manager knows how to work the company and will for you. Free 7 days on used games. I beat the game in 7 days and then return it, though I suppose it isn't giving them great business. Best Buy. When an object on sale rung up at the wrong price, I asked them to change it to what the shelf said. The cashier said she couldn't, so I asked her to call the manager to change it then. The manager came over and said, "That's the price." I said, "Well, let's walk over to the shelf and I'll show you the posted price." He said, "No, and we don't want your business." So I got mad and asked for the senior manager, at which point he told the cashier to call the police. I was like, "I've done nothing wrong, call them." They came and were like, "Yeah, he's a complete butthole, but he did ask you to leave, and if you don't, you're trespassing." So I asked the cop for his contact info and then contacted Best Buy Corporate and explained it, provided the manager's name and cop's name, and they sent me a $200 gift card as an apology. But I was done with Best Buy. I gave it to a family member for Christmas, since this happened a couple of weeks before Christmas a few years ago. They were very pleased. Burger King. Almost every time I've gotten food poisoning in my life, it's been from BK. I've had crap service many times as well, but the final straw was that I wanted the spicy chicken sandwich thing with extra sauce on it. The last couple of times, there was barely any of the spicy orange sauce on it. I opened the box it was in, and the fricking thing was swimming with the sauce. Not just extra sauce, but the sandwich was a soggy mess of chicken, bun, and sauce. It was completely inedible. I complained to the manager and he said, "Well, you wanted extra sauce." F you. Sony. Not because of stupid hacking, because they used to be a great engineering company, and then sold out and got into music and movie creation. They started to hobble their devices. Then, they put rootkits on their CDs. They became complete scum. AT&T. I was told I could have UVerse high-speed internet in my apartment. They ship me a router. I leave everything in the box and wait for the installer to get there because I have a funny feeling, which turned out to be correct. The installer shows up, informs me the lines haven't been updated and I can't get UVerse. Disappointed, I take the prepaid UPS sticker out of the box they shipped me, slap it on the box, tape it back up, and ship it back. A month later, I get a bill in the mail for the router. I call and spend a lot of time confirming they indeed got the router and was assured the billing system just hadn't been caught up yet. So I thought it was over. Nope. Months later, I start getting calls from a collection company. AT&T sold my debt to them. I spend more time, oodles of time, telling them that they have the damn router and to call off their hired goons. Ended up sending the goons a certified letter to cease and desist. Everything was quiet. I thought it was over. Nope. A few months later, I start getting calls and letters from another collection agency. Collection agency number 1 sold it to a different collection agency. This time I pitch a fit. I call AT&T. I tweet AT&T reps on Twitter. I raise a heck of a stink, and finally, the calls stop. I think it's over. Nope! I start getting collection letters for $14. Apparently they took off the $89 to $100 for the router they'd been wanting to charge me, but still wanted me to pay the fee the collection agency tacks on to make the debt worth their while. So I call AT&T and they have the fricking nerve to say they'll have to investigate and see if I owe the fee or not. God. Needless to say, I spent many hours on this over the year and I'll never get that back. AT&T, go F yourselves, forever, in the dark with a chainsaw. There was a pizza place near my campus. The middle-aged owner was always there hitting on drunken girls late at night. While that didn't bother me, what did was that any time I tried to order, he brushed me off, like I was distracting him from his flirting. Very rude and arrogant. His employee was incredibly nice and served me. But the fact that it happened more than once, and the fact that there are 3 more pizza places on the same block, well, screw that guy. I mean, I'm more annoyed at the implication of a sober, dirty old man hitting on inebriated girls, but hey, you get teed off by what tees you off, my dude. Canadian here. Rogers, based on many bad experiences and principle. Bell, on principle alone. Quiznos. So, had a coupon for a free sub. I ordered it, and they wouldn't validate the damn thing. Apparently Kellogg's or whatever cereal I got the coupon from did it without their permission, which I find really hard to believe. Anyway, I was starving and they'd made me the sandwich, and I felt guilty, so I paid for the darn thing, even though I was broke and it was like $10 fricking. It was burnt, just a mess of bread and sauce and crap all over, and just straight up fricking disgusting. I don't know how anyone can stand them, I was so mad. Went back just to meet my sister a few days later though, and she had ordered a drink already. Free refills. So we just hung out there, shared the drink and refilled it like 20 times. Vengeance. Not really, I'll never go back. Air France. What a shower of rude and incompetent, snobby jerks in general. I was stuck in Paris 2 years ago at Christmas because of snow. They had nobody working the desks anywhere. They booked me into a hotel room that didn't exist, so I left the warm departure lounge for the freezing entrance. A member of staff told me to F off when I asked when the customer service desk would open, and they literally had one check-in desk open to deal with all the rearranged flights in their own fricking airport. They then lost my luggage for the whole 3 weeks I was home and refused any compensation claim. Oh yeah, and the morons will speak French to you on a Paris to Tokyo flight and be angry when you need to switch to English. So I started replying in Japanese, ya funny boys. Ulta. Too many snobs. God, me too. I found a great price on an epilator at Ulta online. Went to the store and found it was $25 more expensive. Asked the sales girl about it and she stood there seriously for about 5 minutes, scratching her head and being all, "Oh my god, that's so weird, I can't believe, like, it's a different price. How weird is that? Like, it's so random, oh my god." I had to actually walk away and find someone who looked less stupid, but couldn't find anyone, so left and I bought the epilator at Target instead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not exactly relevant anymore since they closed down years ago, but before that point, Circuit City. I've had 2 horrible experiences with them, and after the second time, I swore to never go back there again. Shortly after the GameCube came out, I was searching all around town for one. I called them up and they said they had a whole bunch in stock. We drove over there, about a 10-minute drive, and not only did they not have any, they hadn't had any for days and wouldn't be getting any for several more days. The day Xenosaga Episode 3 came out, I walked around town to try and find a copy. Circuit City said they had a few copies, and they'd save one for me. We took that same 10-minute drive out there, and I find the guy I spoke with and he opens a drawer and pulls out Xenosaga Episode 2. I tell him, no, I wanted Episode 3. His reply, this is 3. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. That's 2. Whatever, man, it's the same thing anyway, right? So are you gonna buy it? No, I'm looking for 3. I have 2. But this is the same thing? You're an idiot. And so I left, never to return. Dell. 4 years ago, I had some expensive Dell XPS laptop that started getting randomly hot, so I called Dell's customer support. They tell me nothing is wrong, then hang up on me. A few weeks later, my laptop won't turn on. I call customer support again, but this time they send someone out to look at the laptop. The motherboard was cracked, so they just replace it, but the laptop was still getting really hot. 14-year-old me thinks that the fans are broken, shocker, right? But they insist that nothing is wrong. Long story short, they end up replacing my motherboard, RAM, and hard drive over the next few visits, but they still insist the laptop just gets hot. At this point, it's not the same laptop, so I keep asking Dell for a new one, since this one just doesn't work. They won't replace it, but my mum finds out where I live. Dell has been sued and lost multiple times for using faulty parts and so on. We bring that up, and a few weeks later there's a $4,500 Alienware laptop sitting at my door that they sent me for free. My friend still wonders why I tell him to never buy from Dell and just offer to help them build their own PCs instead. Walmart. I don't hate capitalism or large corporations, but Walmart represents everything that is wrong with American capitalism and corporate culture. Yeah, this would be my answer too. There are so many things wrong with it that I can't even point out which is most important. They treat their workers horribly, their customers horribly, they do illegal crap overseas and use sweatshops to make their prices so low. They put smaller companies out of business and ruin livelihoods in the process. And they mess up the economy so that it has to rely on all these horrible facets. They're terrible on every level. I can't boycott every company that does anything wrong, but holy crap, if you're gonna pick one to boycott, it should be this one. It doesn't cover the same issues, just the symptoms, but feel free to enjoy our old video, Store Workers and Customers, What's Your People of Walmart Story, on this channel to hear what this mega corporation turns people into. Capital One. They kept losing my payments, my online payments, so I'm not sure how you can lose those. 100 times this. Years ago, I had a credit card with them. It had a balance of around $600. I called to let them know I was canceling it. I planned to pay it off over a few months at $150 a month. At the time, I was reasonably well off, so I paid most of my bills on autopilot. After 9 months, I realized I was still paying it off, and that didn't make sense. I checked my balance. With no new charges and paying $150 a month, my balance was now over $1,000. I called them and went through all kinds of people before I found out what was happening. They had literally made up charges on my account. I knew the charges were fake because I'd already cancelled the card. These fake charges were putting me repeatedly over my limit, with a $40 over-limit charge each time this happened. Once I realized this and threatened legal action, they realized it was a computer error, and that your account is fine. They apologized for the mistake and I thought I was done with it. 10 years later, I started getting calls trying to collect on a $1,500 balance. Whenever I get such a call, I simply tell them, that account was paid in full and on time and you have been defrauded. I generally don't hear anything for about a year at a time now. Target Photo Center. They had an ad that when you sign up, you got 50 free prints. So I made an account and ordered 50 pictures for my 21-year-old cousin's funeral picture board. I show up and the trashy lady tried to charge me for all the prints. When I ask to see a manager, she just laughs and walks away. And it wasn't the first time I had a bad experience there. Apple. I work in IT, so I will never understand paying more money for less functionality, less hardware flexibility, and proprietary connectors. Nexon. As for gaming, worst company I have ever bought virtual points for. I spent about $600 in 2 years for that game, and their customer service was pretty much non-existent. You'd send a complaint, a ticket, and you'd get an immediate response, "We're busy, we may not get to your ticket for a while." And 6 months later you'd get a response, but nothing would be accomplished. So you'd send another complaint and it's just a horrible experience. 0 out of 10 would never buy from again. Nikon. I got one of their PowerShot cameras and I had it for about 8 months. I didn't get it wet, I didn't drop it. Basically, I kept it in ideal condition, but the LCD screen still broke. So I sent it to them just to have it fixed. Keep in mind it was still under warranty, so repairs should have been free. A few weeks later, they sent me an email that basically said, "Yeah, we'll fix it." For $100? Hell no! That was almost half the price of the camera. Switched back to Canon and haven't looked back. After watching Food Inc., I haven't bought one Tyson product. It's been nearly 2 years and I've continued to buy free range and as much organic stuff as I can. Coming from someone who makes minimum wage, it's hard to afford, but I refuse to support crap companies like Tyson. Their plant, anti-union bias, active recruiting in poverty-stricken countries, and pollution have ruined my hometown. You can smell my town 15 miles away. What makes me more mad, though, is how my hometown bent over backward to accommodate them. Lexington, Nebraska is run by the "money? Yes" idea of government, and it leads to a smelly, broke, corrupt as crap rural Nebraskan town. Lenovo. Like a month ago, I ordered a laptop with them. Due to finding a better deal online, I decided to purchase a different laptop. Before I spent the money, I cancelled the order with Lenovo. Unlike something like Amazon where you can cancel it online, I had to call and I had to talk with someone who I could barely understand. Thick foreign accent. 45 minutes later, I thought I'd cancelled the order. The man told me it would take 3 to 5 days and they'd send me an email. 7 days later, I got the email. Another 4 days after that, and I was charged the $800 for the laptop, despite only having $500 in my account, overdrafting 3 pending purchases. Another 2 hours on the phone with my bank and Lenovo, and I was promised a full refund within 24 to 48 hours. Those passed and nothing happened. I called again and they said the order had already shipped. It shipped weeks after I cancelled the order? So I had to wait until it arrived and refuse the order. Today, a week or so after that, and I've still got nothing in my account, despite them continually saying like within 3 business days and in 24 hours. I still don't have any money, but Wells Fargo is on my side at least. In summary, screw Lenovo. They charged me for an order since it shipped over a week after I cancelled it, and have taken 3 weeks and still haven't given me back the money I desperately need and have incurred about $100 of fees due to overdrafts on. Well, since I've already complained about HP, I'll say that in my one instance of complaint to Lenovo, they were a lot better about it and refunded. But then again, their crappy laptop had electrocuted me, so maybe they got off easy for that. VMware. I purchased an academic license of Workstation 9 from them, and I needed another for my other computer. It's only a per-computer license. Nowhere on the academic site did it say you could only buy 1 academic copy. Their website errored out on purchase, telling me that my email address was already registered when I tried to buy the second license for Workstation while already logged in. I contacted support, and after a month of runaround and my pointing out that I had an academic project coming due that required the second license, they told me that I could only get 1 academic license for Workstation, which was stated nowhere on their site. I then requested my support ticket to be escalated due to them giving me the runaround, and they suggested using an alternate email to purchase the software. You need an EDU email to get the academic version, and it's kind of hard to get a second EDU email. I'm not dealing with their bullcrap anymore, not after that one. If they wanted to say you can only buy 1 copy of Workstation on academic license within even the first week of the ticket, that's one thing, but to mess me around for a month while I have academic work coming due that requires the second license and then give me the bird after a month of messing me around, screw them. Business in Australia called Harvey Norman's. I'll never shop there because the guy who runs it, Jerry Harvey, is a huge whiner who always wants the government to tax this or ban that because his business is hard to run in the current economic conditions. It's called capitalism, mate. Just because you had some boom times doesn't mean it'll last forever. Adapt or die. Sears. While working there for a year and a half, I came to the conclusion that they don't care about their customers or their employees. Those are great examples of how they like to mess over everyone. I hated working there, and I can't believe the one I worked at is still open. We'd have 5 customers all night, and then managers would yell at us for not getting 5 people to join the rewards program or get a credit card. They told us to lie about the rewards program and to sign people up without them knowing. They wanted us to ask for their phone numbers and emails and sign them up without telling them why. It was so stressful. A woman had been working there for 25-ish years and was only making 9-something an hour. I was sick of going home and crying every night, and I was sick of being threatened with losing my job. Before I quit, my manager informed me that the store manager did not want me there. I worked hard and I was great with customers, but I wouldn't lie or sweet-talk people into something they really didn't want, so they drove me to quit. What be some of the strangest things about life on the high seas? Things can get much heavier quickly because the floor is moving. Machinery running within steel walls will destroy your hearing, and fire is very, very scary. The most dangerous thing out there, weirdly. In the case of the US Navy, we had a dedicated at-sea fire party. This was made up of damage control men and hull technicians. We would be the first responders in any sort of fire, flooding, or toxic gas situations, including reactor emergencies. We would fight the fire until we either A, put it out, or B, it would get out of control and the ship would then go into general quarters, battle stations. Then the rest of the crew would meet in their predetermined areas and help fight the fire or flooding. The ship is broken into sections that have repair lockers, think mini fire stations, with all the equipment to fight. When the fire is initially called away, the fire party will respond to the closest repair locker and then gear up and move out from there. In a GQ scenario, each repair locker is manned by the entire crew. Every few feet in the ship, on every deck and level, is a fire plug with a hose and nozzles. The hoses are fed by seawater that we've pumped in and loops at a constant 150 psi. The ship is designed in a manner that sections can be closed off with watertight doors and fire-tight doors. That way, you can keep it isolated. In the case that the fire is burning so intensely that we can't make entry to actually fight the fire, You'd go into the compartment above or below or next to and spray the decks or overhead to try and keep the heat from becoming so intense that it lights off another fire. As a hull technician, I did extensive training both before the fleet and during the fleet. On the ship, the fire party trains and runs drills several times a week, and the GQ drill at least once a week in my cases. In the fire party, we have all of our positions that we know to go to immediately, like nozzle man, team leader, scene leader, plug man, plotter, etc. The main thing is don't let fires happen. It's the #1 killer for us out there, so a lot of time and effort goes into prevention. In conclusion, put the wet stuff on the hot stuff. When you get off the boat, you don't actually feel off the boat for sometimes a week. Vertigo is real nasty. I never got seasick ever. My first time being on a boat was for a month. Then getting off in Portugal, I got land sick. It was a bummer. Trying to compensate for waves that don't exist, my father made his living back in the day repairing old fishing ships for recreational use, so I spent a lot of time at sea. I've fallen out of the shower at home after being out for a few months. You get used to the ship rolling and your body adapts and sways to compensate. When you're back on land, it can take a few days to reorient yourself. You can be showering and not realize you're swaying. Before you know it, you're on your butt with the shower curtain wrapped around you and a bump on your head from the curtain rod. As a man who can trip over on an unimpeded straight walk with no help from vertigo, the narrator is beginning to think he should never ever go on a long voyage. I've always slept better at sea. I think the rolling of the ship has something to do with it. I always enjoyed the rough weather. Everyone seems to be in a better, cooperative mood due to the shared experience, like how neighbors all pull together in a big snowstorm. I spent a lot of my childhood at sea with my dad, and one thing I always remember about sleeping on the water is the sound of barnacles. My bunk was right up in the bow and right against the hull at water level, and you could hear them eating at night. To those who haven't heard it, they snap their beak things closed when they catch plankton, or at least that's what I assumed was happening. And there's like a billion of these things living on the outside of the boat, so you can hear this constant multitude of faint clicks, almost like rain. It's a soothing noise. I miss it. That sounds both so gross and so soothing. You can become very disoriented from being surrounded by nothing but water. You get to see so much of the world, but 70% of it is water. We joined the Navy to see the world, and what did we see? We saw the sea. If you wanted to join the other 30%, you should have joined the Army like a real man. The constant movement. Plus, if you're standing watches, you never get enough steady sleep, and you're only half there after 2 or 3 days. You'll find yourself dozing off on your feet. Also, when you eat, keep a hand on your plate. Probably how beautiful the stars are and how frightening the sea gets during a storm. The only time I've ever really seen the Milky Way was in the open ocean at night. We were going back to our rental house in the Bahamas. I was about 14 and had no idea what I was looking at. I didn't understand when my sister told me it was the Milky Way, but it made a huge impression on me. Electronic communications technician here, aboard a submarine. I control all the information going on or off our boat. I establish secure communication with satellites and other ships. I love it, and I wouldn't want to do any other job in the Navy. Getting fresh fruit and vegetables is very rare. Going months without sunlight screws with your head, but your body still knows when it's time to go to bed anyway. We make our own water and air, but from time to time we'll come to the surface for some fresh air. At that point, no one can sleep because the O2 levels just shot up. The ocean is bigger and deeper than you think. It's amazing how much contrast the water has from port to port. The blue water in the Pacific is unlike anything I've ever seen on TV or in magazines. It's beautiful and vast. You have to see it from the deck of a submarine to grasp it. So, when there's a storm, how far underwater are the effects of it seen? For that matter, is there ever turbulence of any kind from things like currents or thermoclines? It depends on how bad the sea state is. I've been pretty deep under a bad storm and we were rocking a bit. We try to go around what we can if they're really bad. Kind of a different perspective here. I served in the US Navy for some time aboard an aircraft carrier. Fresh water is a precious resource, so showers are a bit different. You don't get in and stand under running water. It's essentially a hose with a button on the side of the nozzle. The steps for taking a shower are as follows. 1. Get wet. 2. Soap and wash. 3. Rinse. You work 12 hours, then 12 hours off. It's a loud environment and the ship shakes and shudders often during flight operations. Sometimes to get from point A to point B on the ship requires going up and down several ladders or stairs. My dad is the captain of a 4-story tugboat in the Gulf of Mexico. They putter along at 2 to 6 knots from Brownsville to somewhere in Florida and anywhere in between, pushing up to, I think, 12 or 20 barges. He spends 2 weeks on the ship and 1 week off. He hates it. His deckhands play video games and watch cartoons in the galley. If anything, he probably enjoys yelling when that happens. He has to wake up at noon, sleep at 6 p.m., wake back up at midnight, and go back to sleep by 6 a.m. This is so a relief captain can take over for half of the day. That order reverses on the second week. Deckhands cook the food. The only good food they can make is Neiman Marcus cake, which is very rich. He's home now for a week. I'd get him on Reddit to tell his stories in his own words, but he refuses to get on here. He'd rather get his news from the television. Point is, he hates working on that ship, but that's all he knows how to do. When you start off on a boat, you're a deckhand. You're the captain's whipping boy. You'll run many miles a day on a ship with wet-painted steel floors. Be expected to lift 100 pounds straight up 8 feet, no problem. Chance of man overboard. Pays very well, and you can get a job as a deckhand almost any time with no experience. There you go. If narration ever fails me, I can follow the call of the sea, lift 100 pounds several times a day, break my back, and fall overboard. That's the life. Royal Navy here. I love the fact that on the upper deck of one's ship, looking out to sea, you're seeing what sailors 100, 200, 500, and 1,000 years ago saw. The exact same. Now go to a Roman ruin and look at it. That's not what they saw. I love that, even though it's just waves and stuff. I worked on a cruise ship for a year. There are many things that I could mention. Most likely that you'll have no windows in your room. This is quite disorienting if you feel movement all the time but can't see what's going on. Internet is spotty and expensive. The ship moves, sometimes a lot. There are seriously passengers who don't understand this tiny fact. Everything can be dangerous. As the first guy said, fire is the main enemy of a ship. People all train constantly for disasters when they work and live at sea. This training can be hit or miss, but every bigger ship has the systems in place to save lives if something happens. But not just for fire, trainings are held for bombs, evacuation, and other things. That said, everything is beautiful. Life is basically full of beautiful sunsets and sunrises, and amazing beaches and cultures in between. Your shipmates will have interesting and crazy lives that you will learn about intimately, whether you want to or not. Life at sea is obviously vastly different for someone sailing a small boat than for someone working as one of an 800 crew member on a cruise ship, but I do highly recommend doing it if you have the opportunity. I loved it. The stress from being out there alone, working in harsh conditions with the same people over and over every day. Some people got into fist fights, some people were just so agitated they wanted to be left alone. But a lot of us made jokes and tried to have fun. My favorite part was going out into the middle of the night and seeing all the stars. So many stars with no artificial lights to block them. And when we went to Alaska, we saw the northern lights. It was amazing to see the lights reflected off the water. I had pictures, but my camera was stolen. I was in the Navy and life at sea had become very routine. We were at sea for almost 3 months straight during a deployment. We, most of us, had standard working hours during the day. The guys in the engine room were 6 hours on, 6 off. We stood watch, ate, watched movies, and did whatever else we could to stay busy. Other than drills and actual emergencies, not much changes day to day. I always enjoyed smoking cigarettes at night. The smoke boxes, as we called them, were one of the only places we could be outside at night. Navy ships run dark at night with no outside lights or white lights above the main deck. The smell of the ocean, the sound of the ship moving through the water, and the stars in the sky was something that I'll never forget. It was a different lifestyle that I really fell in love with. Yeah, parts of it sucked, but it sure beats sitting in a cubicle all day. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've done a couple of hitches on a traditional Arctic schooner. The concept of privacy is very different. In some cases, the only personal space you have is a 6-foot by 3-foot bunk for sleeping in and storing all your stuff. So you get very close to the people around you, otherwise it's miserable. You also get used to there being no real free time. Your schedule is usually 6 hours on and 6 hours off, so you have limited time to eat and sleep before your next watch. Also, fresh water is only for drinking, so you take a lot of deck baths despite how cold it is. But it's also beautiful out there on the water. I've gotten to hear a whale song through the boards of my bunk as well as above the water. I've seen humpback whales breaching only 50 feet away from me during bow watch. It's an experience that very little can match. I found it interesting that after a few days, sea salt starts congealing on everything, even though you can't see ocean spray hitting it. The rain is nice because it cleans it off and you can sit down or hold railings without getting salt all over you for a few days. Time can get monotonous. You become like a dog, in that you look forward to lunch and dinner because that's about the most exciting part of the day. Your ratio of sunsets watched will skyrocket because after dinner you don't have anything to do really but smoke cigs and shoot the crap while watching the sunset. They're pretty amazing though, better than their land counterparts. Also, the stars at night. I've seen the Milky Way so bright that it was reflecting off the ocean. It's worth noting that experiences of working at sea will differ greatly, depending on what kind of vessel you're on, your position, rank, where you operate, and how long you spend away from home. I'd say it's the latter that most people will agree on, being away from home. This will vary from 4 months to 10 months a year for people. I do approximately 8 months away a year, 2 to 3 month contracts. Spending a large proportion of your time away from friends and family will change your life. You'll lose touch with people, relationships will be tough, and there's going to be a majority chance that you'll miss any wedding, funeral, or holiday. But those are the terms and conditions we all signed up for knowing this, although maybe not understanding it fully. As a trade, we do get benefits which one needs to decide themselves if they outweigh the negatives. Maybe not answering the question, but it's just my 2 cents. Of course, this time away would be a massive factor. Part of me wonders if it would have been worth it to do this for a few years immediately after I'd left high school to save up some money before uni, but there might be better options for gaining other skills too. Guys from the third world make up the majority of seafarers on UK-flagged ships, so most ship owners can cut costs. They're penny pinchers. 95% of all trade is done by sea. Most ships don't have internet, so it can be isolating. Most UK ships tend not to be registered in the UK for this reason. 90% of vessels I served on were registered in the Bahamas. You tickle your pickle any chance of solitude you get. Thus the main reason to keep those shower shoes handy. If you're on a smallish boat, how difficult day-to-day tasks can get. Making a cup of coffee in the galley without a window or small porthole in rough seas can be quite the challenge. Pouring anything with liquid in the galley is very, very difficult. It's just so easy to get everything everywhere. Try getting dressed in cramped quarters constantly being buffeted from one side to the other. Or taking a crap or a pee, you'll have to watch the level in the toilet and flush before it runs over the edge onto you in a rogue wave. The intimacy on board on most boats, there's very little privacy. You live with your crew every waking moment. You have to be very comfortable with yourself and not be easily bothered. Going upstairs in high seas is a real crapshoot. 1 second you feel like you weigh 3 times as much as usual, and then the next second you're lighter than air. Sea legs don't tend to disappear. I've been off the ship for about 6 years now, and I still walk with a swagger, apparently. Sleeping in high seas is nigh impossible. You'll flop about with the ship, and starfishing doesn't help after Force 10. Polish sailors will drink anything. Filipino sailors will hide everything everywhere. They also love singing Sinatra on karaoke. Often the cook is also a deckhand, so if it's been a busy day, prepare for crap food. Cargo watch sucks, deck watch sucks, it all sucks. Cue the gay jokes. Fresh milk is more important than nicotine for keeping the crew and officers from killing each other. The chief officer will always drink, even on a dry ship. A ship doesn't normally dictate its culture, the captain does. A crappy captain is crappy for everyone. Testing lifeboats is fun, getting an infection is not. Day trippers are fricking morons who don't follow the rules of the road. I'm not moving? Oh really? I've got 9,000 tons of steel and 4,500 BHP that says differently. Counting lighthouse flashes is quite fun. Anchor watch is the best. You sit on the bridge and you read and you smoke. You'll hear a lot of gay jokes. Sunny FM is the best place in the world. Duty-free cigs, booze, adult magazines, and knives. That's it. 5 litres of vodka, €3. 200 Marlboro, €2. German dungeon smut, 3 for 99 cents. Basically, money. I come from 6 generations of seamen, all with the same goal in life. Catch fish, sell them, get drunk, and get laid. Maybe not work, but I've spent more time on water than most. I've spent a year on my sailboat sailing down from Vancouver to Mexico and then cruising in Mexico for 6 months, most of it single-handed. It's not all sunshine and beer. When you're out there and things start to suck, it's not like you can go home. In the 1800s and the early 1900s, seafarers were idolized because everyone knew someone close that went to sea for a living. There was more understanding of what the working conditions were like among the general population. Now, people that go to sea are in a huge minority. People don't know anymore what it's like out there at sea. You don't know the bone-chilling cold there is at night in the North Pacific before the continental shelf drops. Hint, it pushes cold water up from the bottom of the sea to the top. You don't know what it's like to be out there in 12-foot sea with less than 6-second periods. That freaking sucks. You don't know what it's like to have monster waves at night that you can't see until they're right on top of you. You don't know what it's like to be in a shipping lane at night in the fog without radar. Yes, I'm stupid for that last one. But there's nothing so freeing as being alone out on deck on dog watch on a cold night with your cheeks cold and your nose slightly stuffed from watching the stars play in the night sky. Your only steering guide, the red-lit compass in front of you. But being out there on deck, slightly cold steering ship at night and seeing the stars dissolve into dawn is an amazing sight. I'd trade many a stormy night for that experience. Then there's also the relief of finally coming into harbor after an insane storm when everything is wet. You, your gear, your sleeping bag, your bunk, the whole boat. The feeling when you tie up, everyone gets their wet gear off and you sit in the saloon and make dinner while everyone is sore and tired. Arr. The feeling of seeing land for the first time in a long time. Approaching an island or a coastline doesn't look populated at all, just indescribably beautiful and innocent. Once you're within a mile or so, humanity and the scope of it takes over. Ah yes, the beautiful world, an accident of cosmic proportions or the hand of some divine being in all its glory, laid out for your own oh crap, there are the people. Damn. The shower water can be really hard and it will dry out your skin. Also, if you get hurt or family problems, toothache, or any other unplanned reason you need to get back to the beach, it can take hours to mobilize a chopper to get you. Then the travel time out could be hours and then back again. I work as an instrument technician on a production platform. The work is generally pretty easy, but sometimes it can be stressful and difficult at times. For example, working on big equipment with heavy wrenches, working with government inspectors, working in 90 degrees Fahrenheit plus 90% humidity in direct sunlight in your FRC overalls. You're working on equipment that if it fails can kill people or cause millions of dollars in deferred production. The work schedule is 14 on and 14 off as well. We're a lucky platform as we have 2-man rooms, bunks, with our own bathroom as well. It's like a little hotel. We have satellite TV and Wi-Fi on the platform. I'm offshore right now. The funniest part is working and living with the same 50 guys every 2 weeks. They become your other family and your best friends. The food ranges from terrible to decent depending on the cook and how far away from the last food delivery you are. No beer or booze allowed. Dangers? Lots. Mostly from the process. Flammable hydrocarbons under pressure and physical dangers, falling from high places and crap falling on you. Much less chemical dangers than working at a refinery or chemical plant though. I don't like it that much. Being away from my significant other and daughter sucks, but the ratio of what I get paid to the actual amount of work I do is kind of silly. If I could find a land job that paid this much, I'd do it, but I'm making $120K plus now. I was on a carrier and a couple of things come to mind. 1. Life at sea is like the movie Groundhog Day. It's literally the same thing day in and day out, but every now and then you'll hit a port and go have a blast. 2. Don't be the dirty guy. Most sailors have to live in small compartments with upwards of 80 or so other people. Take a shower and change your sheets. 3. A person that you normally wouldn't be attracted to will eventually look like a supermodel the longer you're out at sea. It's a condition called boat goggles, and can only be cured by a port visit. 4. You work with people you like and quite a few that you hate. But if anyone needs your help, you give it without question because you're all alone out there. 5. Find a way to break the monotony. Many people work out, play cards, and take classes. I took 3 college classes while out at sea, just had to pay for the books. It helped me out when I left the Navy for college. I served on board a very small, independently deployed US Navy ship for almost 5 years. Just adding to what I read. We became a family. The old man was our dad, the XO was our nagging mum. We spent long nights up on watch, talking about some of the most intimate stuff guys can talk about. I'm a New Yorker and I got to spend quality time with Mormons, rednecks from Georgia, brothers from Mississippi, weirdos from Cali, Filipinos, etc. As those times got further in my rearview mirror, I got out like 15 years ago, and that's what I think I missed the most. Never thought I'd miss the balls to 4 and the crappy coffee.
Teachers, what's the funniest thing to come out of one of your students' mouths? My first grade class was learning the word powerful. Kids came up with examples of powerful things and people, like elephants and Superman. Then one boy said, "Babies are powerful because they can cry and get whatever they want." "Teacher, I need a pencil." "Where do the pencils live?" "I have a bucket of sharpened pencils for them to use." "Pennsylvania?" I'm a teacher in Canada, told the kids to name me 5 US states and their row could go out for recess first. A boy raised his hand and said, "Rattlesnake?" "What?" "Oh, snakes." "No, states. Name 5 states." T-bone?" "You're naming steaks." "States. States." Resource teacher was in the room and we were crying laughing. "Gas, liquid, solid, plasma, Bose-Einstein condensate." In 7th grade on a test, the question was, why do some people see technology as positive and others see the same technology as a problem? And a kid simply put, "Because some people are Amish?" I remember in year 3 we had to answer a logic question about why there might be uneven amounts of shoes at the door. I'd recently watched Titanic for the first time, so decided to write, "One person might be a one-legged working girl." It helped that my mum was a parent helper that day. I'm a white guy teaching ESL in Asia. My students were tasked to complete, "The old man's hair was as white as blank." One student asked if she could write down my name in that spot. Phys ed teacher here. I always wear shorts while teaching. Parent-teacher conferences roll around and a grade 1 student comes up to me with her parents. "Mr. Smith, I've never seen you wear pants before." I've never responded quicker to a comment before in my life to clear that up. Reminds me of when my wife worked in an undisclosed location women's shelter. My daughter wanted to see where mummy worked, but we could never go. I was picking up my daughter from school when she said, in the middle of the crowded school hall, "Daddy, can we finally go and visit mommy in the shelter?" This reminds me of my nephew when he was 3. We dropped his mom, my sister, off at work, where she met a colleague outside and went inside with him. Back at home, my nephew reported to everyone that he'd seen mommy go away with a man. Context is a very important thing, but its removal can lead to all sorts of marvelous situations like this. I still enjoy it when someone introduces me, their game leader in Dungeons & Dragons, as their dungeon master in public, to many raised eyebrows. Teaching English to middle schoolers in Korea, I asked, "Okay, what's another way you can express surprise in English?" After going over expressions like, "No way, are you serious? Are you kidding me?" One kid yells from the very back of the room, "What the frick?" I did the same thing when I was little and still not fluent in English. My teacher said, "What phrases can you make with beat?" She was looking for something like beat up or beat at. I was reading a lot of stuff in English on the internet and without thinking much said, "Beat the crap out of." So proud of such a long phrase I'd achieved. I was sent out of the class. ESL teacher. I had my students do an activity where they had to give directions based off a map and situations I'd chosen. The final question was more complex and one of my students wrote, "Way too difficult, take a cab." On a 3rd grade Charlotte's Web quiz, give 2 pieces of evidence that support this statement. Charlotte was a good friend to Wilbur. The answer given was, she comforted him and didn't let him become pork. You know what I don't get about that story? Why is the pig the one who becomes famous? The real news is the fricking super genius spider who knows how to think critically and write in English. Who cares what it thinks about the pig? I want to know its thoughts on the origins of reality. An elementary school kid saw the answer key. He swore he'd come up with "answers may vary" all on his own. What's sad is we had to grade a first semester chemistry test once at university that was made for the medical students. I don't remember if the medical students were at first semester too. They took the test together with the first semester chemistry students but had an alternative version anyway. Thing is, the grading sheet with the right answers was leaked beforehand. One student wrote the correct answer down and then wrote 1 point for every correct formula underneath his answer. How do you finish school without walking in front of a car when you're that damn stupid? I asked a 3-year-old what love was for a Valentine's Day card to his parents. His response? Maybe love is what tornadoes need. We call him the professor because he teaches us new things every day. In nutrition class at community college, the teacher asks, "What's one of the first things you throw out of the window when you drink booze?" and this kid just mumbles, standards. A fellow student once answered in the head to the question, where was JFK shot, instead of the intended answer of Dallas. I mean, he was also shot in his car. I've got a story from my fiance's childhood. They were testing her intelligence or awareness and showed her an image with a TV in the room. The TV was turned on, showing a cartoon, and had a plant on top of it. The question was, what's on the television? The answer was, a plant. Apparently, she kept insisting in utter frustration until the administrator bothered to look at the image and not the answer sheet. Reminds me of a friend's story. I don't know about public schools, but for sure at private schools you get a little quiz-type test with a teacher before they confirm you're ready for kindergarten. One of the things he had to do was identify pictures. He aced the section except for the picture of the airplane. He looked and thought hard and then burst into tears saying, I don't know what that is. Turns out his dad worked for Boeing, and he was trying and failing to discern exactly what model plane the super generic picture was depicting. This is very cute, bless the little guy's heart. Probably trying to count the windows and work out whether it was a 737 or 747, coming up short for both. Why are you late? The bell went off before I got here. Why are you late? I had trouble with my bike. What was the trouble? I didn't get on it early enough. College professor teaching developmental psychology. At the end of the semester, I asked all the students to write down the most interesting or important thing they've learned. One wrote, babies are stupid and old people still do the deed. It's not wrong, kinda covers the lifespan. My dad used to coach basketball and was trying to get kids into a 2-3 zone. He yelled out to one kid in particular who was in man-to-man, what defense are we playing? The kid slaps the floor and says, tough defense. I teach forensic science. We were going to be using iodine to fume fingerprints. Iodine vapor is no joke, so I terrify the students and use only 2 volunteers with goggles and respirators at the chemical hood. But we still go over the MSDs, PPE, and equipment. I spend maybe 5 minutes talking about everything and the chemical hood to my class of 30. Towards the end, so someone tell me, what is a hood? A hand shot up. Yes, student. It's like the place where you grew up. I facepalm, the class laughs, and I'm unable to pivot his answer in the moment. He's on the spectrum and wasn't trying to be funny. This is intentional, but I teach a foreign language, so when I introduce the word for I don't know, I call on a student who typically gets answers wrong, and ask them to translate the word as if he or she should know it. When the student inevitably responds with, I don't know, I tell them they're right, and the look on their face is always priceless. In a class that deals with electricity, I asked the students to name a good conductor. They said Leonard Bernstein. As a music teacher, this brings me great joy. Asked what is the moral of the story in The Little Engine That Could, I got the answer, don't pick up hitchhikers. To refresh your memory, the engine had trouble getting up the hill because he had taken on several more passengers due to their train breaking down. What side of the road do people in France drive on? Miss, they drive on both sides. I'm not the teacher, but I witnessed this in class. Sociology professor asks, why do you conform? Student, it's always been my goal in life to blend in. Professor, no more questions for you. In German, there's this little drawing game called Das Haus vom Nikolaus, consisting of drawing a house without lifting the pen or drawing the same line twice. Well, the act of drawing something without lifting your pen is called in einem Zug zeichnen, which literally translates to drawing in a train. So yes, one kid actually drew a house in a train. Okay, kids, name something living. A fox. Name something non-living. Fox crap. I wrote an exam where the question was, can you name the 3 models of DNA replication? She wrote, no. I mean, that was bad question writing on your part. While something like name 3 types of DNA replication would still result in the student writing no, you should recognize that this would be equivalent to leaving the question blank with the original wording. It was a valid answer to your question. It's not a valid response to the above rewording. Makes me remember something I did when I was in grade 2. The student teacher took us into a private room one by one for eye exams. I've never taken an eye exam before, and it wasn't really explained to me what was happening. I was just sat down and asked to read the first line of the chart, then the second, then the third. By the time it came to the 4th line, I was like, It's too small for me to read. 1 minute, please. Then I got up, walked over to the board and started reading the letters. Apparently, that's not how you do eye exams.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I teach English to Vietnamese kids. I asked, "What is the population of Vietnam?" The kid quickly surveyed the room and said, "More than 15. This guy is going places." I can finally answer one of these. The student is reading a science magazine during a bit of downtime. Student: Whoa, yo, mister, you mean to tell me pollen is like a flower splooge? Sort of. Man, I be getting that crap in my face all the time. Well, he's not wrong. Most of us are catching steaming floral loads to the face every day of spring. Some of us love it, and it makes others of us sick. Kind of like transmitted diseases. Fun thought. I asked my class, "When is a time you've used integrity?" My student answered, "I wash my hands after going to the bathroom, even though no one's there." I don't think anyone I work with has any of this kind of integrity. Something my brother answered for homework. My brother was in year 1 and his homework was to draw a balloon blown up. He drew a picture with lots of squiggly shapes spread out across the paper. He took it as the balloon blown up, like a bomb, so he drew the leftovers of an exploded balloon. His teacher loved it and gave him full marks. Not a teacher, but a witness. In high school history class, the teacher asked, "What was the peace treaty that ended World War II?" This was a trick question because there wasn't a single treaty that ended the war, and this one kid blurted out, "The Manhattan Project." The teacher laughed so hard that he went and got the other history teacher and had the kid tell him the answer too. Teaching grade 5. Students were fooling around during group work, so I said sarcastically, "Do I need to stand here and watch you do your work?" To which the student responded even more sarcastically, "Well, you don't have to stand, you can grab the chair and sit." I can't remember which grade it was, but probably the 2nd or 3rd grade. Teacher was asking something relatively simple and no one wanted to or knew the answer. "What's going on here? There should be hands up like trees in the forest." "Maybe this is a logging area," said the joker of our class. I had this pretty attractive history teacher. She was talking about jewels or something at a museum and I blurted out, "Mrs. Smith, I can show you some real nice jewels." And everyone bust out laughing and the teacher got very red and flustered and embarrassed, and I looked confused because I meant I would show her big diamonds and rubies to jokingly woo her, but the class and the teacher took it as I was referencing my nether regions. I was teaching kindergarteners about needs versus wants, and I showed pictures of things and we talked about why it was or wasn't. After a picture of a puppy came up, everyone but one kid said want, so I asked him to explain his answer. He just says, "But what if you're blind?" Good answer, you win, kid. I once drew a woolly mammoth picture because I couldn't remember the name of it for a quiz question in science class. I got the point for it. I worked in a special needs class for a year and there was one kid with a textbook case of Asperger syndrome. Very bright, very tough nut to crack. I tried to tell him a corny joke once and he was not having it. "Why did the chicken cross the road?" "He likely had business over there or was compelled by force." Well, okay. Easily my favorite memory of that class. My friend's also on the spectrum. It's led to similar punchlines to classic corny jokes. "Why don't people play poker in the jungle?" "Because the undiscovered tribes who inhabit the jungle have had no contact with Western culture. Therefore, they would never have heard of any game called poker, let alone know how to play it." Trying to delicately explain to a 3-year-old why she should be kind to her mum. "You shouldn't say those things to mummy when she's sick. Who looks after you when you're sick and makes you feel better?" "The doctor." "Well, frick." I gave a group of 2nd graders a worksheet about main idea and detail. In the instructions, they were told to circle the main idea and underline the details. One child returned the paper to me very promptly, having underlined the phrase, "the main idea," and having circled the details in the instructions. She knew exactly what she was doing when she turned it in. She was a clever one. She did just fine when I asked her to complete the assignment as expected. I said, "The quiz tomorrow will be on," and my student shouted, "Paper!" Everyone laughed and I rephrased the question. One of my kids couldn't remember what country wasn't a part of the UK on a test, so she put Mexico. I teach English in Japan. When teaching my students, I asked, "What do we say when someone is being too loud?" And one smartass yells, "Shut up forever!" I've never said this, no clue where he learned it either. I nearly lost my crap, but he wasn't wrong. The correct answer is, "Be quiet, please," which I told him was more polite. He just grinned as if he knew, but didn't care. Smart kid, I'll miss him when I change jobs. I get this pretty often from my students. My favorite is when I say, "Please be quiet," to new students and they ask their friends what I said. Usually someone will come back with, "Shut up." I teach and coach baseball. After our short stop got thrown out on the second for the third out, I told someone to pick up Will, in baseball terms meaning get his glove and hat so he can go out to the field. This kid who was new to baseball, a big lineman type of football player, claps his hands and goes to the shortstop. "It's okay, Will, you'll get him next time." I cried laughing. Poor William. Well, at least he didn't get hauled over the lineman's shoulder and carried off the pitch. I'm a teacher, but my best answer to this is in high school. An English teacher was asking about the poetic reasoning behind why the moon is always used in a feminine context. Guy behind me says, "Because they're both on a 28-day cycle?" When I used to teach anatomy, "Anthony, name this bone." Femur. Is it a left femur or a right femur? Yeah. My godfather is a lobster fisherman, and all of the kids in the family would go out on the boat with him from time to time. There was a running joke with my uncle, dad, and godfather. They would get a kid to bait a trap, then applaud them for being a master baiter. My cousin went back to school after summer vacation, and when the teacher asked what she did that summer, she proudly stated, "I became a..." Well, you get the picture. Not a teacher, but just a witness to this hilarity. In science class in high school, our teacher was talking about electricity and lightning and the effects of being shocked. He asked if anyone happens to know what is the first sense you lose when struck by lightning. Without missing a beat, a girl put her hand up and answered, in all honesty, "Your sense of humor?" The class had to stop for a few minutes until everyone could regain their composure. This one kid twice on the same quiz. First question, describe the bus ride at the beginning of the chapter. It was a bus ride filled with action, but also with emotion. Second question, what happens at the end of the story? The story ends. That kid is going to be a politician someday. My wife is an elementary school teacher. The kids were practicing their 2 times tables, and the question said something along the lines of, John lives in his house with his mum, dad, brother, and grandpa. How many total hands do the people in John's house have altogether? The answer they were looking for was 10, and they wanted the students to show that 2 times 5 equals 10. This young man instead wrote, "Not enough information. What if someone lost a hand?" He wasn't wrong. My wife just wrote "good thinking" on his assignment and gave him full credit. The kid was bright and knew his times tables, so that wasn't an issue. She also had his older brother as a student and said they were both smart, but jokesters. My wife now teaches kindergarten, this was when she taught 3rd grade, and said she misses the funny responses on tests. She used to have a full Word document of the funniest answers. There was a buddy of mine in college, Jay, who was legendary for his witty responses in class. We were training to be RAs, and the residential life person asked, "What are some things that, as an RA, you shouldn't do in your dorm room?" People were saying stuff like drinking, etc. Jay raises his hand and says, "Practicing medicine without a license." The trainer was like, yeah, that's true. The same guy was in a film class. The teacher asks, "What technique defined the scene we just watched?" Jay raised his hand, gets called on and says, "Long, awkward silences." Teacher, could you give an example? Jay then proceeded to look awkwardly at the teacher, opening his mouth to say something periodically for 20 seconds. I co-teach a class and do a lot of the grading. Kids will write, "I love teacher A," and I'm like, "Ha, this is teacher B, nice try, losers." Not especially funny, but I've thought about it for a long time afterwards. I was substituting for an elementary ESL class. There was one young boy from Africa. We asked the kids in the class what 3 wishes they would like if they could have anything. This young man said, 1. New shoes for my mother. 2. School all year. 3. Roast chicken for dinner. Most of the other wishes had to do with toys or candy. This kid was focused. We had a quiz about the 1960s in what I think was either my sophomore or junior year. One of the questions was, John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy were the first brothers to do, and we had to fill in the blank. We were doing a peer edit of the quiz the next day with another class's quiz. When my teacher got to the JFK and RFK question, someone raised their hand and said, "My guy wrote down JFK and RFK were the first two brothers to do Marilyn Monroe." Mr. Q's reply was, "Technically that is kind of correct, but dock a point off anyway because the real answer is run for president." In conclusion, the Kennedy brothers' claim to fame isn't running for office, it was doing Marilyn Monroe. I was in a special ed room where the children were sorting nouns. The picture of the mailman went in the people column, the baseball went in the things column, and so on. There were several pictures of animals, and a little girl, who wore shorts with puppies and horses on them almost daily, sorted the animals in the people column and was the only one in class to have done so. I pulled her aside to ask why she didn't sort the animals in the things column. I didn't tell her she was wrong, I just wanted to see her train of thought. And she started giggling and burst out laughing, saying, "How is an animal like a thing? Animals are alive. Cows can't be like a desk." And she's cracking up because she thinks it's so silly that people view animals as things. I asked her if someone taught her that or if she just knew it, and she said it was just something she knows. It was touching and innocent and very sweet. I love animal lovers. What celebrity behaved like a complete jerk to you in public? Wayne Brady screamed at my sister for taking his picture in Vegas. She wasn't taking his picture, he just walked into the shot. He freaked out, screaming that he wanted her to show him that she was deleting it. She was trying to explain that she didn't even know he was there, and showed him the picture that only had a sliver of him in it when she looked through the shots. He continued to berate her about not respecting his privacy in the middle of the Vegas Strip. She was in tears, apologizing for doing nothing wrong, and he never acknowledged he was in the wrong and continued to badmouth her as he stormed away. Can't watch him anymore. Mark Wahlberg did an appearance at his brother's restaurant. He refused to take pictures with anyone taller than him. Now, this I can believe. Met Tiger Woods when I was 15. He slapped my hat out of my hand. A different golfer whom I didn't know ran up, picked up my hat, and asked if his signature would be okay. I agreed, but I don't know who he was or what his name was, but my grandpa was pleased upon seeing it. Pauly Shore. It was mid-90s in New York City, and my wife and I were at a very popular Asian restaurant with a huge wait time. He walks in with an entourage and tries to worm his way ahead of everyone else. He tried to play the "don't you know who I am" card. Hostess was having none of it, said, "Don't know, don't care, you'll wait." They left in a huff. I know this won't come as a surprise, but Steven Seagal used to frequent a restaurant I worked at. Guy was a colossal piece of crap. He treated his wonderful family like crap, and it was obvious he was cheating on his wonderful wife with the Asian nanny. This fricking moron would come into a 10-table restaurant, all 6'5" and 300 pounds of him, wearing a golden kimono in the South, and would wonder why people were looking at him. So he made us take the entry partition down and put it around his table. He was an absolute trash human being. Also met Peyton Manning one night after the Super Bowl he lost to the Saints. This was at an ultra-high-end golf course, and we were not allowed to act like we recognized celebrities, which was more awkward than anything. Anyway, he walked up and ordered a beer and introduced himself, but I was already turning to get the beer as he stuck out his hand to shake my hand and tell me who he was. As if I didn't know who Peyton Manning was in the grounds when I saw his forehead pull into the parking lot. So I blew off Peyton Manning for a handshake. How many of you losers can say that? Great frickin' guy, though. Well, the narrator thought that maybe the author was drawing too many conclusions about Steven Seagal, but after a quick Google I can see that he is, if anything, painting him as less of a D-bag than the man himself often behaved as in public. Didn't happen to me, but I had a physics teacher in high school who sat next to Bill Nye on a plane once. Apparently, he was super unpleasant to be around. Every time this thread comes up, James Corden ends up taking it over. "Hey James, you won't remember me, but me and my friends sat at a table next to you and Harry Styles and some others in Manchurian Legends in London's Chinatown about 6 years ago. We didn't bother you, but you were a massively entitled C-word who yelled and treated the waitstaff like crap. And when one of my party politely suggested you calm down, you got really aggressive and threatening, in a chubby way like a boozy panda. So my question is this: why did Harry seem so cool while you were such a massive, throbbing eggplant?" This is from his AMA thread, by the way, literally hundreds of posts like this from ex-fans, staff, and other actors. I haven't met a rude celebrity yet, but Stanley's security at Calgary Comic Con a few years back was fricking brutal. The guy acted like he was a fricking mercenary.
Stan Lee would sit in a chair and you'd come close to him to get your photo op, and Stan let me be pretty well arm-to-arm close, and his security guard yelled at me and asked Stan if he authorized me to be that close. Even the photographer looked at the security guy like he was crazy. But at the same Comic-Con, meeting Norman Reedus, Stephen Yeun, and Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger, was amazing. They're all super awesome and tried to have a legitimate conversation with you. Steve Yeun even complimented my glasses. 10 out of 10, best con for me. I was the butthole in my store. I saw Don Cheadle at an airport and was thinking about Ocean's 11 and said to my friend, "Dude, it's Bernie Mac." And he looked back and said, "Nah, I'm the other black guy from Ocean's 11, but at least you liked the movie." Jared Leto hit on my girlfriend at the time and called me fat. His brother Shannon was super nice though. At least he didn't tattoo fat on your forehead. He was a total rude, aloof jerk, and his brother was super lovely, warm, and sweet. Jimmy Fallon. I liked his show, and one day while I was getting a tour at NBC Studios, he bumped into me and turned around and said sorry, and then flipped me off, and it's not like I got in his way. He walked into me from behind. David Cross is pretty miserable. He's from Atlanta, and his sister runs a food truck in town. Her recipes were all named after David Cross or Arrested Development type stuff, so my wife and I, being fans of David, asked about it, and she told us she was his sister. So for months, we'd chat her up anytime we ordered food from her truck, and eventually David was in town. She invites us to come to the food truck to meet him, so we bring a poster from the early 2000s and are super pumped to meet him. We get there and she's very anxious and hesitant to introduce us. Weird, but okay. No, it's okay, I'll introduce you. She does, and he was incredibly dismissive and unpleasant. Never heard of anyone having a good interaction with him. Our best interaction was with Conan O'Brien. He was a total class act. Chatted him up in a bathroom line of all places and said my wife and I were huge fans. He said we should come on by the table to chat. I told him we didn't want to interrupt his dinner, but he insisted, then asked if he wanted pictures, and was super cool. I'll say on behalf of Cross that I listened to him on Andy Richter's 3 Questions, and he says he feels bad about being a jerk to his fans when he was younger. He admits actively being a jerk, but he also said he didn't really know how to talk to people at all. He said he'd get weird when people complimented him or said they liked something. I thought it was kind of good of him to admit he'd been a jerk in the past, instead of continuing to be a jerk and just thinking his fans are buttholes. Kurt Vonnegut. I had to get in touch with him frequently for work at a non-profit for several years. He was never once even vaguely polite. I tried to bum a cigarette off Kurt Vonnegut once, when he was guest professor at my old college. Before I could even say a word, he looked up and fricking growled at me. So naturally, I panicked and fled. At the end of the year, the school paper did an interview with him and he was like, "For some reason, hardly anyone came to my office hours." Yeah, Kurt, it's because you growl at people. Bobby Flay. We paid hundreds of dollars to go to a fancy event he was participating in. Waited for a long time just to meet him and say hi, and he looked at us and walked away. He was a real jerk about it too. Bill Nye the Science Guy. I was on a field trip in middle school and our teacher saw him. She politely asked if he could say something to us or just say hi. We always watched him in science class. He told her to F off and basically berated her for bothering him and asking him to speak to a bunch of kids. I'm not sure if he was just having a bad day, but it was not the best experience as a child. Some narrator's insights halfway through the script. Bill Nye's name came up a lot in this story grouping, which may be upsetting to some people, but there it is. Apparently, just don't talk to him if you see him in public. I won't do any more of his stories unless they're particularly juicy. Me and my sister saw Alec Baldwin, Tina Fey, and Salma Hayek on the street when we were eating lunch. They were just coming out of a car, about to go into some building next to us. We had no idea why they were together, but in retrospect, it was definitely because they were filming 30 Rock together. My sister said, "Oh my god, is that Tina Fey?" And Alec Baldwin turned around and went right in her face and said, "Don't freaking say that. Don't speak to us. Why would you say something like that? You can't speak to us, not now." But it didn't really end there. He yelled again at us outside the building, saying, "Don't look over here. Turn around and eat your food. F off." He sounded genuinely furious at us, almost like he wanted us to yell back and start something with him. Honestly, my sister was on the verge of tears. It was horribly embarrassing. Everyone knows now that Alec Baldwin has a history of screaming at people, but at the time we had no idea. Don't get me wrong, my sister shouldn't have yelled at Tina Fey like that, but the way Alec snapped was straight up scary, like he was about to physically attack her. Salma Hayek and some other lady who I didn't recognize came over and apologized to us. She asked if we wanted her to go and get Tina and get her autograph because apparently Tina felt bad, but we said no. She then talked to us about the food we were eating, which was Mexican food, and we ended up having a brief conversation about New York's lack of quality Mexican food. She was incredibly charismatic and sweet. My dad has been a radio personality for over 30 years and worked in country music for over half of that time. He gets to meet celebrities semi-regularly. Apparently Keith Urban was really nice, Carrie Underwood was kind of mediocre because he caught her right after her performance and she was tired, but Kenny Chesney puts the D in D-bag. Direct quote from my dad. Kenny promised to sign some pictures, t-shirts, etc. for a couple of kids who won a game through the radio. Kenny instead took a bunch of groupies into one of the back rooms of the studio with a bottle of whiskey and locked the door. When my dad tried to get him to open the door and fulfill his end of the deal, he called the cops on my dad and he was lucky enough to get a cop who was a good acquaintance. Cops said there wasn't much he could do other than make Kenny leave. So that's what he did. Kids never got their stuff signed, so my dad gave them some coupons for free pizza. He said that after a few years, other radio hosts told him they had similar encounters with Kenny. I've had the perfect combination of bad star, good star. It was at Dragon Con, maybe 2005. I'm going through the big autograph room waiting to get David Carradine's autograph. He looked so mad. He didn't say a word as I told him how much I enjoyed his work. Okay, I get it. Maybe he was having a bad day. Next to Mr. Carradine was Mark Singer, star of Beastmaster, V, among other things. Mr. Singer is smiling, talking to people as they go by. He looks genuinely happy to be there. Suddenly, a woman behind me stumbled and dropped a huge stack of materials she wanted autographed. Mr. Carradine looked down on her like she was a bug. Mark Singer jumped over his table and started helping the woman pick up her things. Didn't hesitate one moment, just started helping. That's when I decided if I ever became famous, I was going to try and be like Mark Singer, not David Carradine. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I sat next to Rosario Dawson on a flight from LA to Austin while she was shooting Death Proof. I didn't recognize her and she kept trying to strike up conversations while I was studying for a Cal 2 final. I was a butthole to her until it came out that she was Rosario Dawson. Then we had a very pleasant conversation. I regret meeting her because I am the jerk. Prince Andrew. Spent a lot of time around him 10 years ago, working at private school events he attended. The guy was a total prick. Maybe he would have been nicer to you if you were younger. I met Shane Dawson at a restaurant I used to work at. He used to come in a few times a year with his fiancée and in-laws. He's a prick. None of my servers liked him or wanted to serve his family, and I damn near had to fight some little girls off the property because they wouldn't leave without seeing him. I sat near him at Denny's in Santa Monica around midnight once. Must have been back when he had longer hair, and I don't think he was dating Ryland yet, but I'd already stopped watching years prior. He was alone with his laptop, didn't even realize until my boyfriend pointed him out, so I looked behind and indeed it was Shanae. Can't remember a single time he thanked our server, although while we were there she was just refilling his coffee. Apparently some people don't feel the need to thank their servers every single time they visit their table. Afterwards, I realized he'd been live tweeting about the other couple a few booths down from us who were seated closer to him. We narrowly avoided him talking crap about us to thousands of people. My gosh. Met Dennis Leary. Butthole. Figures. Mike Rowe was super cool though. Reggie Jackson. He was a childhood idol of mine. I got the opportunity to get a photo with him at some booth at a trade show called Internet World. Years ago, during the .com boom. No one was in line to get pictures with him, so I walked up to get a photo while he was apparently trying to get the girls in the next booth over to sleep with him. He acted all bugged that I asked for a photo, even though that's what he was hired for, and rolled his eyes. I guess he thought I was crimping his style just by showing up in line to get a picture. I tossed the picture in the trash once I got it. Later that day, I got a ball signed by Steve Garvey, who was super nice. He replaced Reggie Jackson as my hero that night. Ace Frehley of Kiss. It was at a rock and roll, TV, movie memorabilia convention in the mid-90s, shortly before the Kiss reunion, and he clearly didn't want to be there. He didn't talk to fans, didn't say hi, heck, he didn't even look at you when you came to his table. He just signed whatever you placed in front of him, and you were hustled away afterwards. On the other hand, Adam Batman West was at the next signing table and he was totally cool guy. Shook hands, chatted with everyone, signed whatever we wanted, posed for pictures, etc. Meeting him more than made up for Ace's surly, hungover D-bag act.
A famous soap opera star in my country, he came into the Dairy Queen I was working at. I didn't know who he was and my co-worker started hyperventilating and went into the back. The guy was rude and when I handed him his cone he said, "Is that all?" Like he expected extra because he was famous. Yeah dude, if you order one scoop, you get one scoop. Didn't find out he was famous until he left and my co-worker came back to the front. "Sir, this is a Dairy Queen, not a drama queen." I've forgiven this particular author for not giving us a name purely on the basis of that clapback added by the subsequent comment. Thank you, oh sassy one. Diana Ross. I worked in a health club in a hotel across the street from a stadium when I was young. She came in, looked at the pool, which was a really decent lap pool, and said, "My bathtub is bigger than this." I replied, "Go back to your bathtub then." She wanted me fired instantly. HR told me to go home for 2 days because if they fired everyone she wanted fired, the hotel wouldn't have any staff. I met James Brown back in the 80s when I lived in Vale. The man was dissatisfied with everything and generally drunk. Absolute flip side was meeting Mr. Rogers when I was at Pitt. That man was the real deal. I wouldn't say disappointing as I was never eager to meet him, but Drake. Drake was just unprofessional and egotistical when I worked with him both times. This was before he got big, first award show type level. He's told me to F off directly and I watched his mum calm him down from a tantrum. My fiancé is a chef at a pretty prominent boutique hotel restaurant in Philly. He says the 2 worst guests were Ariana Grande, made not 1 but 2 servers cry, and the Rolling Stones. The best guests were Sylvester Stallone, Pink, Lady Gaga, and Guy Fieri. Anyone from Pittsburgh can tell you that Ben Roethlisberger is a horrible person. I have a friend who owns a bar on the south side and he has, on multiple occasions, just walked into the bar and said, "My friends and I are drinking for free tonight." He also told Arnold Palmer's grandson that he doesn't sign autographs if he's not getting paid to do so. Legend has it that he earned a pretty nasty verbal beatdown from Palmer and apparently he's banned from his golf course. Arnold Palmer, on the other hand, was an incredibly nice guy. Bill Cosby, even before all his real horrible stuff got publicly known. He came to a restaurant in DC where I was a hostess. I came to get him for his table and he said, "Do you not need a college degree for this job?" No man, have you never met a server before? I was sitting undressed in a Korean day spa steam room when a guy who looked just like Lawrence Fishburne walked in and sat down across from me. I was there with 2 friends and we were talking and you could tell we were all like, could that really be Morpheus? We just kept talking and he was listening to whatever story we were reminiscing about and then he smiled at something we said and we saw the tooth gap. We all played it cool though and didn't say anything until after he left. 10 out of 10, a nice guy to hang out undressed with. The lead singer of Smash Mouth showed me a picture of him sticking a beer bottle into a Brazilian woman. Ruined Astro Lounge for me. I met Wayne Gretzky once. Guy's a bit of a chode to be honest. I caught him on a bad day. We all get like that. His father, rest in peace, was so much cooler than he was. On the flip side, my brother met Gord Downey, also rest in peace, at a get-together. He was with his girlfriend and her family at one of her parents' friends' place. They were all sitting, chatting, having a good time. Out of nowhere, Gord walks in like it's nothing. Apparently the owners of the house were friends with Gord. My brother, being a huge Tragically Hip fan, was internally freaking out, but he kept cool on the outside so as to not bother this guy. He talked with him for a while about sports and things like that. Towards the end of the night when my brother was getting ready to leave, Gord stopped him and shook his hand while saying, "Thank you for pretending not to know who I am." Deion Sanders. I interviewed him at an NFL military event like 8 or 9 years ago, and he was a prick the whole time. He threw my lav mic on the ground when he was done instead of placing it in my outstretched hand. I was also active duty military at the time and the event was on a ship. Hey Sanders, if you hear this, F you dude. F you. Yeah, but he was also capable of being a jerk and throwing mics to the ground at MLB events. You gotta respect that kind of versatility. This guy expected my seat on a plane. He was our local news anchor. Actually said, "I may look familiar." I said, "You're a merchant banker?" Justin Timberlake. This was when I was working a drive-thru at Burger King around 2002 to 2003 or so. He came up at the drive-thru with someone else driving, but he was sticking his head out like, "Hey, hey, hey!" at us. I didn't really recognize him, but he asked if we knew who he was. I said no, but my coworker said yes. Then he looked at me like, "You don't know?" and was just really confused.
My coworker said it was Justin Timberlake, and he said, "Yeah, hello, come on, man." Then he just sort of had small talk. He asked us how work was, how our day was. But here's the thing. The entire time he's leaning all the way over the driver, who was clearly horribly uncomfortable and a bit crushed by him leaning over on him. He asked if I was from the Middle East, and I said no. He clearly didn't listen and said, "Yeah, that sucks. Sorry about the whole Afghanistan thing." He asked if we wanted his autograph. We said sure. He wrote it down and gave it to us. He then said bye and left. It was all in all a really funny experience, and I try not to let it influence my view of him because he was clearly on something, but he just came off like a big goofy attention-loving silly Billy the entire time. Met Morgan Freeman at a Bed Bath & Beyond. He was shopping for a teapot on a lower shelf and stood up right when I almost walked into him, and I was like, "Wow, you look just like Morgan Freeman." And he said without skipping a beat, "If I was Morgan Freeman, wouldn't I be in Hollywood or something?" And the voice made me now like 99.9% certain it was him. And I was like, "I guess you would. Enjoy your time here." I don't regret meeting him, and I don't think he was being a jerk. I just thought it was so Morgan Freeman of him to have a line like that to make you wonder if you met Morgan Freeman or just a guy that likes to act like a character in a bunch of his movies. What's the dumbest thing a criminal has done or said to a cop? I read a theft suspect her Miranda rights, to which she stated in a recorded interview, "I'm invoking my right to silence and a lawyer because I stole a lot of crap and I don't want to incriminate myself." I stopped someone who was in the area of a load of theft from motor vehicles. After a bit of questioning, I carried out a search and found numerous wallets, phones, and other things. He claimed that all of the cards were his, all 13 different identities. To be fair, he stuck to his story. He carried it all the way to court, going not guilty. "Okay then, Mr. Jones, you're under arrest for 12 counts of theft. Mr. Fletcher, you're also under arrest for 12 counts of theft. Mrs. Rodriguez, you are under arrest for 12 counts of theft." Stopped a lady for speeding 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. I asked what her reason could be for going so fast. She said, "I live here. You can't give me a speeding ticket. I live just down the street. I live here. This is unbelievable. I live here." So my personal favorite was when a bloke on a motorbike swerved in front of our squad car and crashed. We hopped out, picked the bike up off him, it was pinning his leg, and asked, "You alright, mate?" To which he replied, "Of course I'm alright, what do you mean?" "Well, you just fell off your bike, mate." "No, I didn't." He just kept insisting that there was no way he could have crashed, and it must have been someone else. I called the cops on my roommate in college because she tried to attack me and she wouldn't cooperate with the cops, so she got cuffed and was screaming about how she was gonna beat me good. They were like, "Yeah? You're gonna beat her good?" And she was agreeing. In court later, the judge asked her, "So you think it's okay to beat someone good if they turn your TV off when you're not there?" And she nodded and said, "Yes, I do." And the judge just deep sighed. She got a big fat fine because they couldn't prove assault. She got charged with something lesser that had a max fine of about $1,500. Funny thing was, she had a pay or appear date for like 3 days before the one she was assigned at our trial, so they agreed to just merge the 2 dates so she wouldn't have to appear twice. So that means she already went to court for something else and got fined for something else too. Folks, in case you were wondering, if you blurt something like this out by accident one time, it might be in your best interest to revise your statement further down the line. People say honesty is the best policy. You can always be honest about seeing a better way forward. Friend who is an officer told me this one a little while ago. He was driving near where a known car thief lived, so he stops by. SUV in the driveway with no tags. My friend walks up, runs the VIN, stolen. Now the property had a house on it, and then out back a small mother-in-law suite where said thief lived. Officer walks out back, knocks, and then hears a car door. Officer starts running, engine starts, and yeah, the thief is driving away in the stolen SUV. Officer knows where he ditches stolen cars at, so has an officer stake out that area. Sure enough, 2 hours later, the SUV rolls up with a Jeep following it. SUV driver wipes down the dash, wipes down the outside door handle, and gets in the Jeep. Officer pulls them over and arrests them both. Why both? The Jeep is stolen too. Officer runs her license, sends another officer to her address, and guess what? She had a stolen car at her place too. 3 stolen cars recovered, 2 people in jail, all because one officer decided to stop by a thief's last address. Not my story, but my police officer friend's. He had gone in to arrest someone for dealing substances. He was in full uniform while someone else had already been there undercover. The substance dealer looks at the undercover cop and says, "You're undercover." "Yes, well done." He looks at my uniformed friend and says, "You're undercover too." He was not. Then he looks at someone else, not a police officer at all, and says, "And you." The guy responds with, "How am I an undercover police officer? I just bought substances off of you." And that's how they made an unexpected arrest at that raid. Not a police officer, but my father was a 911 dispatch operator. My father was working one night and he gets a call from a man who was obviously drunk. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, I think I just heard a red car crash. You heard a red car crash? Yeah. Okay, police are on their way. Click. My dad finds out later that this guy was driving drunk and crashed his car not far from his house. The guy decides to get out of his car, stumble home, and dial 911 to report the fact that he'd had a car crash. In his drunken mind, he figured he'd report the crash as someone who heard it and he'd get off somehow. But he had to specify the color because apparently a red car crashing sounds different than a blue car crashing. Student Paramedic here once went to a family with a 2-year-old with difficulty breathing. Walked into the house to find 4 people and the parents smoking green herb with the baby in the room. The baby was crying, coughing and spluttering. Couldn't believe my eyes. My mentor swiftly rang for police backup and we filled out some safeguarding paperwork concerns. Pretty sure they arrested them on scene for neglect. Dad's a detective. Had a murder case where a dog walker found a severed head in a park. Over the rest of the morning, they found a full set of chopped up body parts around that park. A trail of blood led from each part and they followed them all the way back to a nearby house. In through the door and up the stairs to a room covered in blood with a guy asleep in a bed. Turns out this guy had got drunk with a friend, had an argument, killed him, chopped him up and hid his body parts in the park before passing out back at the house. Police caught him literally red-handed. Apparently he was really confused how they got him so quickly. I was police at the time. In the middle of the night, my partner and I found a car in a cemetery. Stolen cars were dumped there regularly. The car had its windows down and it had only recently been left there. It was still warm to touch. It didn't flag up as stolen and through the window I could see a crystal pipe in plain view. That gives us the ability to search the car. Inside we find a bunch of crystal pipes, 3.5 grams of crystal, a small amount of green herb, and a gat. There was also a tablet phone that was unlocked, and while we were searching the car, the tablet kept on receiving messages from people trying to score crystal. I had a quick look through the phone and was able to figure out that the owner of the car had come out from the city. I worked rurally at the time. They'd come out to make a score from one of the local gangs. But the gang didn't want her turning up, so arranged to meet her at the cemetery and conduct business somewhere else. I leave a business card under the wipers, not my card but the station's, and on the back I wrote that she, the owner of the car, should come down to the station if she wants to get her stuff back. And sure enough she did, at 9 in the morning, high as all heck, looking for her crystal and gat. All the people from To Catch a Predator. NBC has online transcripts and they still come up with the stupidest excuses. The narrator can't really repeat any of those transcripts here, but I encourage you to read them if you want a rather morbid laugh about how people who have explicitly tried to proposition minors try to pass it off as something else. If they were telling the truth, it would be an almost Tobias Funke level of unfortunate phrasing. Suspect was caught for substance possession on the streets, and we were talking to the prosecutor to get a warrant for his house. Somehow he managed to call his wife without our notice, and as we realized what had happened, we heard him saying, "Honey, go take the fish out of the fridge." After we got the warrant and searched his house, there was his fridge full of speed and the plate with fish which his wife had prepared for his return thrown in the trash. Retired cop here. Boy, do I have stories. One idiot move a guy made was to steal some poor girl's car. It was her first car, she worked full-time, was a sweet little thing and we felt so bad, she was crushed. Also in the car for some reason was her cell phone. So a colleague who has the gift of talking crap really well calls the number. A guy answers. It goes a little something like this. "Motherfricker, you stole my girlfriend's car." The answer went, "Which I will frick you up and then frick your girlfriend." "Bring it, motherfricker. No cops, no friends. Me and you. I'm at the Chevron on Main Street and 5th. I'm calling your witch butt out." "Which, I'm on my way." The phone clicks. Me? No fricking way, he's coming! The guy rounded the corner and pulls into the gas station. We hid our cars behind it, and then when he parked, we boxed him in. He had a Glock too. Fricking idiot. He was on probation and had a loaded piece. Yes, he showed up in the stolen car with a fricking shaved key in the ignition he used to steal it. Because people liked it so much, I talked to the original cop who has the gift of talking crap. He said a few months later at court, the guy claimed the gat was not his. As we found it under the driver's seat, he said it must be hers. So messed up. But the jury didn't buy it. We saw him shoving something from his waist under the seat when he saw us. Also, yeah, the look on his face was classic. It went from, I'm gonna kill this dude, to the look a prey animal gets when it knows it's done. He was killed a few years later in a chase in another stolen car. He was ejected from that one. Motor vehicle stop. License and registration, please. Proceeds to lean over the passenger seat, scoops up a handful of lo mein and tries to put it in the officer's hand. He was locked up for DUI, fourth offense. To this day, I still wonder if he thought he was passing his correct paperwork or if the Chinese food was some sort of peace offering. Was witness to a crime and had to give evidence in court. Basically, witnessed a girl crashing her car and barrel rolling it into a tree. She was clearly drunk. The fireman arrived after 10 minutes, her car had leaked petrol everywhere, and then her husband shows up on foot and tries to calm her down, followed by her mother in a car and the police. She tried to claim that she wasn't the one driving, even though no one else had been in the car. In court a year later, she said her mother had been driving, the one who showed up in her own car 10 minutes after the crash. She also punched an officer in the face and was pepper sprayed, but that's a whole other story. Needless to say, she was found guilty. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Dispatcher. Had a guy call in and tell us that he's currently violating the protective order by being with his ex who is pregnant by him. Wants us to call the judge and get it dismissed so they can go inside the restaurant and eat. Officer is standing next to my partner who answers the call and asks the guy where he is so he can send the judge to him. The guy hangs up. Responded to an apartment complex for a kid eating a corn dog and was stuck on the roof. The FD arrives and gets the kid off the roof. Asked the kid why he was eating a corn dog on the roof. His answer was, because I threw it up there. His look of duh left me speechless. DUI trial. Defendant chooses to represent herself. She tries to introduce evidence during the trial, but is quickly blocked by the prosecution. The judge, maybe taking pity on the flaming train wreck that was this woman's defense, asks to see the evidence. It was a receipt from the bar she left before I stopped her that showed she purchased 2 large margaritas. Her whole defense was, I couldn't have been drunk after only 2 margaritas. She was found guilty. My initial reason for stopping her was that she drove down an embankment on the side of the road to get to a McDonald's drive-thru. My friend is sober driving and there's not enough seats, so 2 people offer to go in the boot. On the way, she gets pulled over and the officer comes up to the window and asks if she knows why he pulled her over. She says, because of the 2 people in my boot? The cop says, no, because you failed to indicate at the last intersection, but tell me more about the people in your boot. These are my pants, but those are not my pockets. Can't make this crap up. I maintain that there's a small chance that there was a tiny portal in front of each pocket redirecting to a less innocent man's accoutrements, but nobody listens to me. One of my favorite Cops episodes was a guy they stopped, pulled some substances out of his pants, and his response was, those aren't my pants. The cop then said, oh, and whose pants are they and why are you wearing them then? The guy said, I don't know. My ex said to the cop who pulled him and his friends over, I'm so frickin' high right now. I had a friend back in the day that earned the name DUI Don because he was driving a girl home after partying one night. She was off her rocker and he was only high. Got pulled over, could easily say that he's sober, was happy to blow into the tube and get out of it. The first thing he says to the cop is, I'm gonna level with you, I'm really high. He spent that night in jail. And the cherry on this, and the reason I know the full details of it all, is because the girl with him was 17 and bonus, homeless. When she didn't have anywhere else to go, she gave them my address, an 18-year-old living alone, and I got to become her temporary legal guardian. Awesome night. Thanks, DUI Don. Sir, can I see your driver's license? I don't have one. Then why were you driving? I wasn't. I was traveling. I was the victim of burglary, but heard this from the police officer. I saw the guy breaking into my place on security camera and called them. They managed to arrest the guy while he was still inside packing up my stuff. He was pretty cocky to the police, as he thought that as he hadn't actually left with his bag of swag, that he hadn't committed a crime yet. All he did was break a window. My grandpa was a cop. He told me a story about how when he was still in uniform filling up his squad car, someone tried to rob him with a knife. Needless to say, that didn't work out for him. Apparently it went something like this. "Give me your wallet." "What?" "Give me your wallet." "Are you sure you want to do that?" "Yeah, now hand it over." Grandpa pulls out gun. "Okay, you're under arrest." The robber displayed a shocked Pikachu face. My brother is a Detroit cop. Told me this one. They got a call from someone reporting their car was stolen. They show up and it turns out someone had already stolen the tires off the car and then a different group stole the actual car. They pushed it 2 blocks without tires and left perfect grooves in the street all the way to their garage. Their defense was, "But we didn't steal the tires." Detroit. When we rob you, we really rob you. I'm a corrections officer. 2 inmates got into a fight in a hallway. I was the closest to them and only saw the start of the fight out of the corner of my eye. In my report, I wrote that I saw the 2 inmates fall to the ground with one on top of the other. Later, the hearing sergeant was reading the report to one of the inmates so they could dispute any facts in the report they felt were untrue or biased. He asked the inmate if they wanted to dispute any facts in my report. The inmate said, "Yeah, we didn't fall to the ground. I grabbed the other inmate and slammed his butt on the floor." What would have been a simple fighting charge turned into an assault charge. Woman is waiting for her DUI trial in the courtroom. The lawyers and judge are milling around and getting their paperwork in order. The trial starts in 10 to 15 minutes. The prosecuting attorney asks her if she wants to take the plea deal one last time. She refuses and goes on about how this is unconstitutional and the police and courts are corrupt and how she's going to take her kid to school, blah blah blah. She's starting to cause a bit of a scene, yelling, acting like a child, just being generally annoying. Someone in the room gets a whiff of alcohol. She's out on bond, so she can basically be given a PBT at any time for any reason. The judge orders one on her. She registers a .226 in court. This woman who is on trial for DUI had the audacity to drive to court drunk and then moan and groan about how she isn't being treated fairly and we're all corrupt, and this is unconstitutional. Not only that, but it explicitly states in your bond conditions that you cannot consume alcohol. So, I cut her off and bring her to the jail. She's still running her mouth during the walkover. I had nothing to say. I had absolutely zero sympathy for her. I could barely hold in my laughter on the walk over to the jail. The confession is my own. The cop said, "You're going 95 miles an hour. Do you know what the speed limit is?" "No." "It's 55 miles per hour." "I'm sorry, sir. I thought it was 65. Not a cop, but I used to read a lot of police reports at my old job. My favorite was a woman who refused a breathalyzer by telling the cop, "I won't blow on that, but I'll blow on your eggplant." In a city near to me, a guy murdered a woman, put her body in a large garment bag, and left her in a vacant lot. Unfortunately for him, he forgot to take the tags with his name and address off the bag from a recent flight. A would-be bank robber wrote his hold-up note and put it in his wallet. He got rattled at the bank and accidentally left his driver's license on the counter when he handed the note to a teller. A third crook just took on more than he could handle and apparently didn't watch the time. He had a long history of Grand Theft Auto and was hospitalized after being badly beaten in the parking lot of a sports area after a lacrosse game. The guy swore up and down that he had no idea why anyone would assault him there. Not that I want to be defending any of these people, but I feel like the stress of committing any of these crimes might overcome a lot of common sense. Personally, I rate my chances of getting away with a crime as less than 0, or maybe this is all a cover. In court, defendant called the judge Your Majesty instead of Your Honor. Friend's daughter and daughter's boyfriend got busted with a kilo of green herb. Friend's daughter says, "Oh, we weren't going to smoke it, we were going to sell it." My boyfriend is a police officer. Last week, he pulled over a drunk driver who ended up speeding off. Car chase back to his house and the drunk guy tells him, "I got home, it's okay, you can go now." Drunk guy continues arguing and it's 3 a.m. so his family wakes up and his son steps out the front porch and yells, "Damn it, Dad, you frickin' idiot, we told you to stop doing this." The serial killer BTK. He used to send taunting letters to the media and to the police about his crimes. He seemingly stopped all activity around 10 years ago when he started to communicate again. He asked the police if he could be traced if he sent them a floppy disk, and they told him no. He sent them a floppy disk, and they recovered data that included his name and his church. He was quickly arrested. My brother-in-law is a cop in a small town. Pulled a car over one night and recognized the kid. Smelled green herb inside the car and said, "Give me the green herb and I won't search your car, won't give you a ticket, and you can be on your way." The kid fights him and says he doesn't know what that smell is. There's no green herb, and "How can I trust that you won't take me to the station if I give it to you?" Brother-in-law promises again that if he hands him the green herb, he'll let him go, no questions asked. Kid keeps being a moron. Brother-in-law searches the car and finds many more substances hidden all over, as well as green herb. Brother-in-law says, "All right, let's go to the station." The kid gets upset and says, "You said you weren't going to do this. See, I couldn't trust you." I groan and laugh every time I think of that. What a dummy. My cop brother told me that this one time he took lunch at Popeyes while in uniform, except for the hat. Once inside, the cashier started taking his order but then stopped halfway and turned to a co-worker that just walked up. I don't remember exactly what was said, but basically the guy taking my brother's order asks the other guy if he took his green herb. The other guy says yes, but he didn't smoke at all and proceeds to hand over the green herb. The guy then says, "Cool, not to worry, he's got another stash in his car for emergencies like this." My brother then said that he just wanted to eat some lunch. The guys then realized he was a cop. One guy said something like, "Not again." As my brother started arresting the cashier, he said that he thought my brother was the security guard. So my brother, just trying to make a joke out of it, says, "Oh, you smoke herb with your security guard?" To which the guy says, "No, just my manager and his buddy." But the real funny part was when he asked another employee if the security guard was around, and the employee said they didn't have one and didn't know what the cashier was talking about. What's the most disturbing history you've learned about a house you found on the market? The lady next door to me died and wasn't found until she was more liquid than solid on her living room carpet. The family couldn't pay something back about back taxes or something, and the house went to HUD to auction. HUD paid for some cleanup, but not to replace the carpet, only steam clean it. So it finally sold and was talking to the guy who was flipping it. Before I could mention the death, he asked if the house had a water leak under the foundation, because they ripped up the carpet and pad to put down the new floor, and it was really dirty and got all over them and their clothes. I told him what happened and how HUD went cheap on what to fix before the auction. He got green as a pea and then started emptying his stomach right there on his side of the fence. My grandma sells and rents houses in the Denver area. A few weeks ago, I had to help her evict a few college bros from one of her properties. This is a cottage-style home, no second floor, no basement. These guys literally dug a hole in the wooden floor and made a basement where they've been throwing trash away for the last year. Like, it's a living room with a TV, a couple of armchairs, and a giant hole in the ground filled with ice cream wrappers, pizza boxes, and cigarette butts. That seems like 1,000 times more effort than just taking the fricking garbage out. You know, taking out the garbage is a real pain in the butt. I'm going to perform back-breaking manual labor inside my house to avoid walking 20 feet to the street with a small bag of trash. My parents were realtors and also flipped houses. When I was growing up, I used to help them a lot, usually by cleaning. When I was 12, I was helping with a house that was infested with roaches. I noticed the closets were smeared with crap and children's handprints. There were fingernail scratches on the insides of the doors as well. I asked my parents why this was the case. They told me the old tenants used to lock up their toddlers in the closets for days. How about the one I bought? A young person had drowned in the pool, and so far every person that I've met asks me, "You know what happened there, right?" People are nosy. My mother passed away in my childhood home, which my dad eventually sold. Years later, my brother was picking up the youth group kids, and one teen got in and said, "Our house is haunted. Years ago, a lady died in there." My brother looked her dead in the eye and said, "She was my mom, actually." The poor kid burst into tears immediately. My brother has such a horribly dry sense of humor. Huh. Got a good deal on an apartment because a lady was beaten to death next door. It was an old house converted into separate units. The narrator can't be the only one who would buy a house on the cheap because of a horrible crime there. Bring it on, ghosts.
When I was looking for my last house, I went with my wife and realtor to look at several houses. We went to look at one house in particular because it didn't seem like the price they were asking could be real. A huge house sitting on tons of land without buildings and going for millions under market value. We got there and the realtor said, "Oh, I should mention, a serial killer lived here, and when he was put away, cops found 11 bodies on the property. I think owning this house would make me perpetually afraid of coming across a 12th body digging a vegetable patch or something." "Yeah, but you have the perfect alibi for that dead body buried in the backyard." "Yes, Mr. Police Officer, we brought this house from a serial killer. I guess they forgot one body. Whoopsie, don't know how my wife got there at all." "The body's still decomposing. Well, that is really weird." Not that I was buying, but one that I was visiting. I went to visit my sister in California, and once I flew in, I wanted to shower. Well, I took a long enough shower that the mirror was all steamy when I got out, except one tiny dot in the middle of the mirror. My immediate thought process was, oh, weird. I guess if you draw on a mirror with Expo, it won't steam around it. So I went to go investigate, and upon looking right up to it, I realized it was a fricking camera lens. Well, I freaked out and ran out of her room and dressed and then went and told her. We went around the back and looked in the utility closet type thing that looked like it was in line with her room. Sure enough, the drywall had been cut away and repatched at some point. We cut it open, and while there was no camera, there was a little lens still stuck to the mirror. It's real freaky to think whoever was getting actually spied on, and if they ever actually knew. Ugh. I used to rent an apartment that was in a converted Victorian asylum. It was rumored to be haunted, but I never heard or saw anything whilst living there. When I met with the letting agent to hand the keys back at the property and for him to run through a final inspection, he asked if we had been happy there. I said something to the effect of, yes, but we were only moving as the landlord had set it up for sale. It became clear he was after some kind of ghost story as he explained that none of his colleagues liked going to any apartments in the building, because when taking photos to market one of them, the red eye detector kept triggering on his phone when no one was in the frame. The poor guy looked nervous as heck the whole time we were there. "This is actually a really common glitch when taking photos in old buildings like this. It's caused by the light reflecting off the red eyes of the unquiet dead roaming the space between this world and the next." I photograph homes. It's normal. People die in homes. I photographed a few homes where the reason for sale was a recent self-deletion in the home. I photographed a new home where the builder ended things with himself in the garage just before the project was complete. The weirdest one was very creepy and suspicious. I photographed a billionaire's compound where the guy had had an absurd fascination with flesh. There were well over 50 heads mounted on walls from water buffalo to elephant, 5 to 10 large cats, all stuffed, chandeliers made from the feathers of rare birds, stools made from elephant feet and legs. They were hairy. Ugh. Paintings and abstract photos of oily skin, veiny muscles of humans and animals, among other things. I looked for his kill room, but I never found it. In general, I find billionaires don't behave like normal people, but this one was particularly weird. The flat opposite my house was occupied for a couple of years by a lovely young man. Long hair, gothic clothing. That might not be the right term for it, but frick it, I'm old. Super polite, if a bit reserved. He self-deleted in the flat one day. I only found out afterwards that he had had a liver transplant some years before and was worried his new liver was failing. I wish I could have helped him. I used to see him at my doctor's surgery. I had a new and sickly baby and was there a lot, and so was he. But we just said hi to each other, how are you, etc. I'm really sad for him. The flat has been occupied since by a succession of young couples. I've never said a word in case it troubles them, but I've tried harder since then to let them know I'm there if they ever need a friend. Being young and just starting out can be very lonely. I eventually heard that there was a secret passageway and stairs between bedrooms on the 2nd and 3rd floors that no one could now find, but it was apparently there, well hidden. I've been in a few where the realtor might have had a hard time selling it after it was fixed. One in particular where the entire family was taken off the mortal coil by the mother, who then set herself on fire in the back utility room. My aunt is a realtor and was selling a house that a lady owned, but it was renting out to her college-age son and a few of her friends. When they went to do the first walkthrough so my aunt could take pictures and such, it was apparent that the lady hadn't been in the house in ages. Every single room had a TV, a chair, a box of Kleenex, and a bottle of lotion. They were literally just spanking the mule with each other all over the house all the time. The lady was so embarrassed. When the sold sign went up on our last house, our neighbor came over and said, "Now you're moving out, would you like to know about your house's history?" It turned out the previous owner was a smack dealer who allowed his customers to shoot up in the living room. That explains the brown, dried blood-colored arcs all over the walls when we stripped the wallpaper. He also used to hire out his old lady from an upstairs bedroom. Incidentally, our bedroom. Lovely. An old friend of mine bought a nice house in a quiet neighborhood. The place is beautiful and has a really nice deck out back with a hot tub. About 3 weeks after closing, he was cleaning out some previously owned junk in one of the closets and found an old DVD. It was a Bridget the Midget adult movie with a hot tub scene on the cover. His hot tub. It was epic. That's not so much creepy as it is a fun fact about where you live. I would for sure be showing that to everyone. After they'd used the hot tub, of course. I've been doing this job a while now. The thing that scares me most is how often I find the locks reversed on bedrooms and basement doors. There is a lot of really crappy parents out there. I've actually done this, and it's because the little kids lock themselves in their rooms all the time. I'm big enough and resourceful enough to escape a room like this, but my kids are not. Once you've tried talking a 3-year-old through turning the little knob a few times and they're freaking out, you flip the doorknob around to prevent it from happening in the future. This isn't so much disturbing as moderately amusing. Just days after closing on my house, a friend of mine who was helping me move in told me he had been in my house many times. Turns out his childhood babysitter had lived there. Then he tells me he just wants to show me something in the backyard, and he leads me to the specific fence post on which he had drawn a wang as a child. I do wonder if he'd actually drawn it that day while I wasn't watching. Something similar happened to me. My grandmother lived in Chicago and needed to sell her house. She actually sold it to my husband's father when my husband was about 3. They ended up moving to Hammond around the time he was 15, roughly about the time I met him. My husband and my mother grew up in the same house and didn't find out about it until 4 years ago. Small world. In Seattle, there was a house just up the block from my work. This was probably around 2007 or so. There was a zombie-themed rave, and said house became the after-party. Most of the club kids knew each other, and the ages ranged from 16 to 21. Unfortunately, they invited this loner dude who came over and started unloading a shotgun at around 6:30 to 7 in the morning. Kids dressed like zombies were pouring out of the house, jumping over fences, into the street, into the backyard. Nobody knew who was actually wounded and who wasn't because everyone looked effed up due to their costume. I think like 6 or 7 people died. It's totally effed and has always stuck with me, probably because it was in my neighborhood which I lived and worked. Eventually, the house went up for sale, and I always wondered how much the prospective buyers knew about what happened there. Houses in Seattle don't stay long on the market, so it had a lot of real estate agents and buyers coming and going. I also wondered if there was a little discount considering its history.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I've been in the residential property management industry for 14 years and have managed and leased thousands of apartments and single-family houses. A historic building I used to lease apartments for was formerly an insane asylum, and prior to that was a hospital. The building itself is on the National Historical Registry. Thankfully, I never had a bad experience here except for one unsettling thing in a stairwell, but I did meet people over the years with stories. Anyway, certain things are required for historical landmarks and restoration tax credits in this particular city, so many of the apartments had to maintain certain features of the original design and architecture, like some old tile was still on the walls and floors. The thing that creeped me out was the basement. Even after more than 50 years on most days, you could catch a whiff of formaldehyde. Some days were more pungent and distinct than others. Of course, being the basement, it also had the addition of that musty basement smell. Since this was once a hospital, obviously, it had a morgue. There are a handful of apartments in the basement, and the original tile on the floor marked where the morgue originally started. In one of those apartments, there's a bedroom with incredibly spacious walk-in closets. If you haven't already figured it out, those 2 massive closets are the old body lockers, with the original latches on the walls next to the entrance to the closets. I still for the life of me can't understand how anyone could live in that apartment, because I wouldn't even go into that apartment by myself. These are my 2 most outrageous. I present the tales of the crazy old gynecologist and the adult toy aficionado. The first is short and sweet. A lady wants me to list her house. I go over and do the routine. As I go to the bedroom closet, she yells, "Oh no, don't go in there, it's a horrible mess!"
"It's a walk-in closet, but please don't go in there. It's such a mess and I'm embarrassed." She went on about it way too long for it to just be a mess. I leave it alone and that's that. House gets listed and 2 weeks later I offer to do an open house. The lady has started packing already because I already helped her find a new house. She leaves, I get the open house going, and a nice couple comes in. They go to the master bedroom and there's a wall of boxes in front of the closet. I explain that's a walk-in closet and last time I was there the lady said it was just filled to the brim with stuff. The wife wants to see the closet. The husband starts moving boxes. I ask him not to and he keeps going, "If I'm going to buy a house, I want to see the whole thing." Well, he kind of had me there because I know they loved everything else about the house and the wife seemed super stoked about the kitchen and the master bath. The last box is moved and the door is opened. Inside is a 10 by 10 foot room, jam-packed with phallic adult toys. They're each standing up on very nice custom shelving units with glass doors on the front. The glass doors also have numbers made from a home label maker unit. On the inside of the door is a large sheet of paper. Each number has a corresponding name of some guy. That's when we noticed 2 large boxes in the corner. Each box contained 36 unopened Clona Johnson adult toy making kits. We stared in amazement for a while and then the husband just fricking lost it. It took a good 20 minutes for him to stop laughing, or at least randomly bursting out in laughter. We put everything back the way it was, and that was the end of me letting anyone check out the closet for the rest of the open house. That couple actually ended up buying the house, and since I know everyone will ask, there were 183 homemade statues of eggplants in the closet, and a few store-bought ones too. Now, the other story is the crazy old gynecologist. He asked me to come in and give him a price. He didn't want to sell, but wanted an official market analysis to present in court for his divorce. He offered me $500, so I was happy to come out and write it up for him. First off, I didn't know his profession. He never told me much later until he'd asked me to put doctor and his name on the paperwork, and I asked what kind of doctor he was. Anyway, I show up and the outside of the house looks great. It's super clean, very well maintained for a 70-year-old house, and looks pretty as a picture. I walk in and there's nothing but shelving units lining every single wall. Floor-to-ceiling shelving units. They're also in the middle of every room on the first floor. All of them are loaded with plastic storage bins that are labeled. They all seem to have pretty routine stuff. I'm thinking the guy is just a very organized hoarder. One has boxes and boxes of new pens. One is all rolls of tape. One big one is all toilet paper. As I get further into the house, the storage bins go from office supplies and toiletries to spoons. Just a giant clear storage tub full of random spoons. One is used paper clips. Used paper clips? He's differentiating between new and used ones. Alright, whatever. That's when I notice every room has a TV and a surround sound system, and it's all set up on a shelving unit. This was back when flat screens were like $5,000 and every room had one. Every room also had flying saucers on the ceiling, which he said were repeaters so he could change every TV to the same channel at the same time. I must admit, that was pretty cool. In any case, we go upstairs and it's a mess. The shelving units were all along the walls, but not in the middles of the rooms. And he's got a toaster in the middle of the bedroom floor with a bag of butternut bread next to it and a plate with a mushy stick of butter that looked like it was a week old. It had that sick yellow crystallized look to it. There were books all over the floor and it looked like he just sat on the floor reading and eating toast. Everything was sprawled out in a perfect circle around where he'd sit. That's when I noticed the clear storage tubs were much stranger up here. One entire rack was used tissues. Another several boxes were lubricant. A couple were speculums. Then I realized there were a lot of boxes of tissues, new and used, around his little toast and book circle. I took my measurements and couldn't help but look at some of the titles on his bookshelf. The two that stand out the most were Doing the Deed by Yourself and Show Me. I mostly remember Show Me because it was a very controversial book when I was a kid. It's basically a published book of borderline illegal material disguised as a life skills book. Everything else on the wall of books was also related to this kind of material. And we're not even close to done. I walked into this other bedroom and realized how dark it was. He had tinfoil taped in the windows to black out the room. It was filled with computers on a giant custom-built horseshoe desk. If I recall, there were 8 or 9 screens wrapping around the room, in addition to 2 big flat-screen TVs. As I measured the room, I noticed more tissues and several boxes of new tissues. The screensavers were all showing slideshows of either undressed women or women in bathing suits. I say nothing and we move on. And here's where it gets weird. Oh, you thought we were past the weird stuff? Hold on to your hat. He takes me to the basement. It's a dungeon. Not some flashy, sanitized adult dungeon either. This was dark, dank, and musty. 2 cages in 2 corners, some kind of crucifixion cross with restraints, some weird table with restraints, a full wall of whips and chains and needles. One featured a paddle that had tacks sticking out of it. Swings for doing the deed of varying sorts hanging on the rafters. A wooden trough filled with what I hope was water. There was also a coffin, a rack, an Iron Maiden, and stocks. You know, like the medieval head and hands town square punishment device. Every wall, support, and piece of furniture had some kind of restraints on it, and he walked me through as if nothing was strange about this. And the coup de grace, he shows me the utility room and then shows me his secret room, where the door was disguised as paneling on the back wall of the laundry room. Inside looked like a dungeon out of a fricking horror movie. A giant shelving unit filled with VHS tapes was along one wall. A computer desk with a computer and old-school video editing machines, I assume, boxes of his favorite tissues all over the editing station. Then there was a brass bed with restraints. There were no sheets on the bed and it was horribly stained with God only knows what. Not blood though, I probably would have called the cops if I saw blood on it. There was a mirror above the bed with a microphone dangling and 2 VHS cameras on tripods trained right on the bed. This guy acted like all of this was totally normal. He was like, "Oh, and here's the secret room. I like to come down here to relax. It's just so quiet down here and it feels so safe because it's just hidden away from the rest of the house. If someone ever breaks in, I'd come down here and they'd never even know to look here." No mention whatsoever of the obvious use of this room. Screwing? Tickling the pickle? Murder? The unspeakable act? I have no fricking clue. I collected my $500 and got the F out of there as fast as I could. No one believed me back at the office, and you know what? I don't believe them either. I wouldn't have believed myself if I'd heard it from someone else. I'm guessing he's dead now since he was, here's the kicker, probably about 75 to 80 years old, and this was about 15 years ago. His age and frailty, in addition to my morbid curiosity, was probably the only reason I didn't take off immediately. I remember thinking in my head, keep your guard up, you're going to F this old dude up if you have to. That was one terrifying visit I'll never forget. It's also the only time I didn't shake a customer's hand as I was leaving. My hand still tingles when I think about the introductory handshake and all those clear tubs filled with used tissues. Well, words are failing the narrator. My God. What do you even say or do in that sort of situation? I only wonder what the inheritor or buyer of that house had to do with the thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Anyway, on to our last few stories. Not a realtor, happened to some friends who brought a property. Very old site, about 300 years old, which had been part of a convent, the living area of the nuns specifically. The aforementioned place had been refurbished as small apartments and houses about 50 years ago. They went to live there and there was some maintenance given to certain places of the property, the common areas. There was a wall which was slightly wider than the others. They began to give maintenance to that wall, but the outer layer fell apart due to the rain and old age. While trying to fix that, they found dozens of skeletons of babies, very little babies, and very old little skeletons. Well, authorities and historians came and went by, and they came to the conclusion that the nuns tossed their babies there right after giving birth to them. God knows if they were alive or dead by then. Not unheard of, old religious orders were very strict about that, and then there were even more gruesome policies regarding nuns' pregnancies. My uncle bought a caravan down the coast on a well-known beach. Just prior to selling it, police detectives turned up and turned the place upside down and inside out, looking for some sort of information. Turns out the family of one of Australia's most notorious serial killers used to own the caravan many years ago. What ways have you seen someone hilariously fail using an everyday item? My 90-year-old grandmother was teed off at some other 70-year-olds cooking for a church because they were trying to peel eggs with a vegetable peeler. Witnessed multiple people ask why north just moved on a compass after they'd rotated 90 degrees. I really suck at land navigation and compasses and azimuths and all that stuff, but reading this made me feel like a land nav genius. When a friend and I were in Rome, we were in a restroom and we couldn't figure out how to turn on the sink. We looked for handles, we checked if it had a motion sensor, nothing. Just when we were about to give up hope, I saw a small rubber dome under each sink. I decided to step on it and voila, water. The best part was that there was a man waiting to wash his hands who probably thought that we were the two biggest idiots in the world. We went to the UK this summer and met our first electric shower. Could not figure out how to turn it on until we accidentally flipped the switch in the hallway, and voila! Feels dumb in retrospect, but it was completely foreign to us, literally and figuratively. I worked with someone who genuinely did not know how to use paper clips. He was really embarrassed when someone called him out on not knowing and showed him how. I worked with someone that would hole punch the top left corner, then put the paperclip in like a keychain. After years of using family's Windows 98, I upgraded the family with an old but gold computer. My mother rang me 3 times in the next 2 weeks because she couldn't find the power button. Why? Because the old computer had a big red power button, and the new computer was broken because it had a big blue power button in the exact same spot. I don't even work in IT, and I've considered using the Internet Explorer icon for a Chrome or Firefox browser just to get some older people I know to stop using Internet Explorer. For my dad, I just renamed Chrome to Internet. It's pretty effective so far. I did this with my 72-year-old uncle. I removed Internet Explorer from the desktop and set the Firefox icon to that of the IE one, and named it Internet Explorer. I set up some great add-ins and bookmarks, and then only gave him a user account and set up Chrome Remote Desktop. I went from fixing it almost weekly to maybe twice a year. 5 out of 7 would recommend. My father is fast approaching his pension and is far more computer savvy than I am, hanging my head in shame. I watched someone try to light the base of a firecracker, as in the end without the fuse. To be honest, it is a bit of a miracle that the guy that did that is still in one piece. I saw someone park his bike on the sidewalk and then painstakingly hang his bike lock on one of the handlebars. Then he just walked away. When I was in college, whenever I couldn't find a bike rack, I would just park it and lock the front wheel to the frame, then sit somewhere inside where I could see it. In the cafeteria one time, someone tried to steal it by riding away and tossed themselves over the handlebars. Pretty entertaining. I once, as a child, thought that one of those long lighters for candles was a curling iron, proceeded to burn the crap out of my ear and hair. I saw someone open a milk carton by cutting the top off with a knife. First time this kid stayed away from home without parents, he thought an iron worked just by being a heavy metal thing to flatten the clothes into submission. Didn't realize you could turn it on to heat it up or anything like that. I remember sitting at a bus stop opposite a pair of escalators that were the wrong way to standard traffic. Every third person went up the down escalator. I go up about 4 escalators every day. Sometimes they change the direction so the right escalator comes down and the left goes up for no apparent reason other than to mess with the people. And mess with the people they do. Everyone, like me, who's stuck in their routine in the morning, will try to go up the usual escalator only to have people come their way and almost bump into them. Can opener. Twisted so hard they fell sideways off their chair. A time or dozen back in my days of working on a forklift, after a long night when I'd get into my car, I'd start it and promptly put on the left blinker and rev the engine trying to back it up. One day was particularly bad and it took me a few moments to put it all together. I've seen someone so incompetent with a can opener that every can they opened looked like a Pillsbury biscuit canister. I've got one of those can openers that you can just lay on top and cleanly opens the can with no sharp edges. I've never had it not work. You can literally just lay it on there and turn the crank really easily. It's so easy and requires less effort than a normal can opener. My wife cannot operate it. I've explained it multiple times. She brought a crappy old style one that creates throwing stars every time you use it. I thought those types of can openers were foolproof until I got one that refused to grip the edge. I had to try so hard to convince my significant other that they were the superior can openers, only to have to later agree to getting a sideways one after an unfortunate incident with a can of lima beans. I felt so betrayed, and now he doesn't trust my opinion on any kitchenware. A shovel. I saw someone put their foot up on it, ready to push down, and then just topple sideways. Holy moly! Actually, no holy moly. Back in the 90s, when I tried to show my mother how to use my home PC, she picked up the mouse and pointed it at the screen like a remote control. A lady of a certain age had her first computer and tried to operate the mouse on the floor with her foot. Her only frame of reference was a sewing machine, which was operated with a foot pedal. You know, she had a reference and she tried for it. I can be happy when old people do that rather than just blame me for breaking it. I know someone who was running late to work and his polyester polo shirt was still wet from the washer. What did he do? Put it in the dryer for 5 minutes? Use a hairdryer? No. He whacked it into the microwave and put it on for a couple of minutes. Nice and warm when he got it out. A trip to the emergency department and second-degree burns later, and he was a changed man. I had a college student who once set his apartment on fire because he put his wet clothes in the oven to dry and then immediately left to go to Six Flags. One of his roommates fortunately came home before the fire got out of hand. A family member in the early days of polyester got a stain on her skirt at work. She took off her skirt, cleaned it, and dried it, but the whole thing melted in the dryer. She laughed and made a skirt out of a magazine and wore that home. One guy at a breakfast buffet got to the bacon tray. He took a pair of tongs and held them backwards, as in the part which you're supposed to grab bacon with, in his hand, and pinched it closed so only a slit was left between the two rods, trying to slide the bacon in between the prongs. I had to help him after watching this for 2 minutes. This was a grown man, by the way. I went to a Chinese restaurant once and had a good giggle at the two women at the next table, expressing how great the learner chopsticks were, despite clearly struggling with them. It was cheap wooden chopsticks and they hadn't even snapped them apart. Saw someone trying to staple some pages together without a stapler, just going at it with a single staple in hand. Did they manage it though? After about 20 minutes of struggle, they had something that vaguely resembled a stapled document. So, yeah, I guess so. I'm going to assume that by vaguely resembled, they mean was a gross parody of. There was no way that was a tidy or satisfactory document, or stable. I wouldn't necessarily call this a fail, but more of a success. Went to the beach with family and my cousin was on watermelon duty. She starts cutting the watermelons and says, "Man, it's so hard to cut this." I turn around and she's using the wrong side of the knife, but she had already cut the watermelon into like 4 pieces. She's known as not being the brightest person out there, but I was still surprised at her superhuman strength. I went to the library high on green herb and I swiped my student ID through the automatic stapler. Now, every time I go to the library, I have to explain why I can't swipe my card through the card reader. An egg. I took a cake decorating class. In 12 weeks, this woman never figured out how to crack a raw egg. Every single time, she crushed it, no matter what advice she got or how many times she was shown. In high school, we had to do a cooking class. A guy in my group tried to peel a boiled egg and ended up with the shell and all of the white part of the egg in the trash, and presented the spherical hard-boiled yolk on the plate as the finished product. When I was a kid, we would laugh when my mum would try to play Mario Bros. On Nintendo and she would try to jump lifting up the controller. Now, I try to play Nintendo Wii with my son and he laughs at me because I forget to jump by raising up the controller. She truly was ahead of her time. One of my roommates once failed to make the Kraft instant mac and cheese bowls twice. The first time he didn't take the lid off and just YOLO'd the whole thing into the microwave. On the second attempt, he put in nowhere near enough water, there's a line on the inside showing you where to fill it up to, and he got a second helping of burnt pasta. And I got a microwave that smelled like burnt pasta for a week. He had a bachelor's in engineering, a bachelor's in applied mathematics, and a master's in applied mathematics, and he couldn't make Easy Mac designed for 12-year-olds. Not someone else, but myself. I constantly fail at ripping cling film or tinfoil correctly. In the case of tinfoil, I always struggle to rip it in the first place, and then when I do, I leave a weird tail on the end of the roll instead of a clean line. Same thing with cling wrap, but then it proceeds to cling to itself and nothing else, so I wind up with a bunch of awkward balls of it. I'm just trying to cover my soup, guys. My fiancé can't use a toaster. It's either lightly toasted or Satan. There's no in between. I've shown her numerous times. Same result. Would sir like his toast raw or carbonized? Raw toast? Do you mean bread, my dude? Maybe she's so bad at the toaster it comes out as dough? Sometimes when I'm in a hurry, I'll start pulling my car door before I reach the handle and it sends me into a backward stumble. Gotta look around and see if anyone was watching at those moments. Occasionally, I'll get too close and pull the door open straight into my own face because my mornings are difficult for me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not so much hilarious, but a great example of humans using logic without understanding the true meaning. I was in Portugal, in Lisbon, at a better-than-decent hotel. There was a couple in front of the elevator looking up at the floor indicator in a way that we presumed this was a new thing for them. We were on the ground floor. The male of the other party saw the elevator was above us and pushed the down button to bring it to him. The elevator came, they got on, but we didn't. As the elevator left for the parking garage, I pushed the up button. I still remember the look of mild confusion on their faces when we met again. It was flawless logic, that's just not how elevators work. Pushing the directional button in the direction you want to travel instead of the direction the elevator has to travel to reach you is not necessarily obvious. Much like the people who drive grey cars in light fog, they often don't realize that turning on your lights isn't so that they can see the road, it's so that other people can see their car. Sometimes I'll start reaching for the button on my keys to unlock my front door. I once called my cousin to bring my extra set of car keys to me because the remote button stopped working. She suggested using the actual key to unlock the actual handle. I've never felt stupider. Back in primary school, while waiting at something akin to reception, I don't remember exactly where this happened, I saw a kid about 7 or 8 years old accompanied by a teacher taking nibbles from an unpeeled banana. He was trying to play it off like he enjoyed the taste, going, and trying not to cringe. I think the teacher had to point it out to him that it's meant to be peeled. He was the kind of chavvy kid that got in trouble a lot, and the teacher was with him for some kind of supervisory help. I don't remember much about him other than whenever I saw him about school, I'd think of him as that moron who pretends to like eating banana peels. A soda machine, the kind where you press your cup against the lever to make the soda come out. I was at my local burger joint waiting for my order when I saw a middle-aged gentleman walk up to the soda machine with a cup in hand. He placed his cup under the spout and pressed the logo part on top. Nothing came out. He pressed harder. No soda. Undeterred, he changed spouts to try a different soda. Maybe this one was out. Nope. He comes back to the original spout and pressed the top portion so hard with his entire hand that somehow his cup and machine got tilted for long enough for a few drops of soda to come out. He takes his cup with a few drops of soda and leaves. Many moons ago, while working at an electronics store, a woman came in furious because we sold her a useless phone. After talking her down to where she would explain the issue, we found out that she didn't want a cell service plan, so she bought a cordless phone, never connected the base to the phone line, and thought she could just use the cordless receiver as a cell phone. Then there was the guy that returned a microphone, saying he was getting shocks from holding it. I opened the box to find out that he'd cut off the plug that goes into the amplifier and put on a regular wall power plug. It turned out that he didn't know that you need an amplifier and speakers. He thought that you just plug a microphone into any old outlet anywhere and suddenly you have a loud booming voice. As a working voiceover, I'm looking at my Rode NT1 and imagining myself just severing the mic cable in the same way that this gentleman did, and it's hurting both my wallet and my brain. Working in IT. Please reboot your computer. What does that mean? Just turn the computer off and turn it back on again. 5 seconds later. Okay, done. Wait, that was quick. I pressed the power button, it turned off, and it came back on. Are you pressing the power button on the monitor? You didn't say monitor. What's a monitor? You see the screen? Not that button. Press the power button on the box that the screen connects to. On the modem? Yeah, sure. Okay, Windows has that startup screen. Fantastic, that's what we need. Idiot! Why have you wasted my time? You should have used the right words. It's working now. I thought you were IT. This happens more than you would think. Nah, it's fine. Computers have only been around in more or less their current form and UI for around 20 years. You expect people to familiarize themselves with the basics of ubiquitous technologies in only 2 decades? Sheesh. Saw someone slide a cheese grater to grate the cheese instead of just sliding the cheese. This was a big grater, so it wasn't really practical to move the grater. I'd have to say cinnamon. One fall day, I decided to make myself some hot cocoa. My husband at the time, now ex, saw me making some and decided he wanted to make some too. I decided I wanted to go all out. I added whipped cream, then sprinkled some sugar and cinnamon on top. It looked so good. I even put a cinnamon stick in it to make it look extra gourmet. All my husband saw was that I had cinnamon sprinkled on top, and there were cinnamon sticks out on the counter. So I sat on the couch to enjoy my cocoa and I heard, how do you do it? And I turned around to see him holding a cinnamon stick and gently shaking it over the top of the whipped cream. I couldn't stop laughing. I once had a roommate who offered to help me make a fridge pie. We had both just moved in and didn't have everything we needed yet, so I asked her to whip cream with a large fork and even showed her how to do it. I go to do something else for a few minutes, then turn to see if she's done whipping the cream yet. She was just moving the fork slowly back and forth an inch or so in each direction, in a straight line. When I turned to her, she complained that it's not working, and that we really need an electric beater to whip cream. I giggled and said she has to do it really fast and in larger strokes to incorporate the air, and demonstrated again. She then threw the bowl and fork down in a huff and said, "Oh, I give up," and stormed out of the kitchen. It was the first warning sign, really. My mother-in-law has struggled with the tea kettle as well as a pram. The kettle has a button to open the spout. Hold down the button, spout lid pops up, and you can pour the boiling water into your cup. Somehow, she was trying to push the button from the side and then turning the kettle over until nearly upside down to get it to pour, because the lid was not in fact opening using this method, causing very hot water to spit out all around but not actually into the cup. She did this several times, all while making frustrated noises and burning herself with the wayward tea water. I finally managed to get her to put the kettle down and showed her how to press the button on the top instead of on the side. I know they also make kettles with sliding buttons that you push from side to side, but this is usually evident right away, or at least after the first failed attempt. Not for mother-in-law, who upends a full, very hot kettle anyway. And then there was the case of the pram versus the tree. Walking along pushing an empty pram, because no one in their right mind would let her push a pram with a baby in it, she was confronted by a tree and its rather large roots. She proceeds to back up a step and then charge forward at speed, but still the roots resist her efforts. Cue to the mad woman pulling the pram back and slamming it into the roots several times while bystanders look on in horror. Assuming there's a child within, one woman shouts and starts to run over to rescue the child who's not actually there, which gives mother-in-law the added adrenaline needed for one final grand slam, sending the pram flying over the roots and straight into the trunk of the tree. And that's why grandma isn't allowed near small children. My husband has cooked exactly 3 times in the decade of our marriage. Each was a disaster, but the final straw was when he tried to make ramen. We were at an Airbnb that didn't have a kettle, so I told him he'd have to boil the water in a pot. I noticed that the water is boiling, but he's just standing there. I asked what he was doing, the water was ready, and he says, "Isn't it supposed to whistle?" The man was used to hearing a stovetop kettle whistling when the water boiled and thought the water itself, by some mysterious mechanism, whistled when boiled. I have a friend who is literally a genius. This guy finished standard university-level math by his early teens and is now into the stuff you need an advanced degree just to work with. Brain the size of a planet. And there was the time he called me in a panic because he'd locked himself inside a house. He couldn't find the key, you see? It was so funny I was tempted to leave him there. The fact of the matter is that this house didn't even have a locking deadbolt, which is why it's a funny story. It wouldn't be interesting at all if he was actually locked inside. Give me some credit here. My father has a PhD, countless professional publications, teaches at a prestigious graduate-level program, and is generally a super smart guy. He cannot drive in reverse or use basic hand tools to save his life. Push and pull doors. Every time anyone was affronted with one ever. I work in a restaurant and I remember dropping a plate of food to my table as well as leaving them a peppermill per their request. As I'm standing at the bar casually surveying the dining room, I see the guy at my table attempt to navigate grinding pepper onto his plate. Unsuccessfully. He's turned it upside down and is shaking it vigorously all while inspecting his progress. Eventually, he sets it down, seemingly satisfied with his results, I suppose. Then his tablemate picks it up and simply grinds some pepper onto her food. My cat tried to jump onto a kitchen stool. He didn't see that there was a tray placed on top, and for a brief moment, he and it flew, magic carpet style. I saw a woman trying to use a kitchen broom to sweep 3 feet of snow from her car. She was sweeping it right in front of her car, Best part was her dumb boyfriend using the broom tray to remove the snow from the top of the car and tossing it right where she was sweeping from. This went on for about 30 minutes and then they went back inside. In the late 90s, I showed my dad how to use a search engine. I left the room for no more than 5 minutes before he started cursing wildly. My dad, being in construction, searched stud finders for his first search. Embarrassingly, there have been multiple times where I've tried to apply the two-finger zoom functionality to a paper map. It's become such a second nature with electronic devices that sometimes it just happens reflexively. Me. I thought French presses were fancy and connoisseurs used them, so they must be some tricky, nuanced way to make coffee. I had to use one once and I realized it was actually very simple. You just separate the grounds by lifting them out of the coffee. So I poured water in, pushed down the filter, then spread the grinds on top. My sister came in and face-palmed. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.